Hi, this is Damien Marie AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can be understood simply as a value theory or a value science atheist. Or, for my personal case, I am an axiologist, a value theorist, who's also an atheist. And I'm here with a very exciting guest who I really admire as a philosopher and as a developed human being and a fellow thinker. Could you go ahead and tell us who you are and a little bit about you?
My name is Jordan, and I run a website called ideasandhat.com, and I also have a YouTube channel called Ideas and Hat, and basically I just do conversations about philosophy and science in all domains of philosophy and science, not just one particular domain.
Yeah, one of the things I found the most fun, for people that don't know, unfortunately, me and Jordan had an absolutely fabulous conversation. And unfortunately, the desire was it would be recorded, and my computer decided to refrag itself like in halfway through the conversation. So,
things happen.
Yeah, so things happen. But I really wanted to tell people that it's really nice for me personally. I know I talked to a lot of people, but I'm a really deep thinker, and I like to really be able to go theoretical and both normative. And you're the first person I feel like that is able to do that with me. It's fun.
Hopefully I'm not the only person who will ever have the opportunity to do that. Although it's probably a statistical abnormality, and either way.
Yeah, and so it's not surprising that I always have said I'm a polymath who does not very good at math, and you definitely have described yourself as a polymath. I'm like, I wonder if that's why I like him so much.
I don't think anybody's really good at math. Even I think like Terence Tao, he won a Fields Medal in number theory, right? He teaches calculus, and he said that he sucks at algebra. So here you have someone who was doing math since he was 4 years old saying he sucks at algebra.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. Well, I always try to tell you is that I understand that math is valuable. I just don't personally have the tools to make it accessible to others, or always myself.
I always, I think there another sense too, like you even distinguish between like math in the sense of explicit conscious math, but then I think there's also like some kind of unconscious math that the human brain does.
Well, true,
that we don't understand. Like when we approach things on angles, the brain has to be doing some kind of mathematics there. It's just it's more unconscious, right? You wouldn't necessarily be calculating trigonomic functions consciously, and if you were, you'd probably be very slow, and so you would die before you even get the chance to do it.
True. Well, I think that's why, as axiologists, I really care about use, because to me, that's where you get, in a sense, theoretical put down into the normative application that everybody, like you said, in a sense, naively can be doing, and I would like to do is in a thoughtful way, try to be ready for it, prepare or plan. Like I can see that all those books behind you, you're very good at planning for things. I really appreciate you, though, taking your time to do a free, in a sense, Lance, or a free, association, talk with me, because I think that even though all those books are good, I think that when we take ideas and then we can share them in a real way, I think it really pushes the arguments forward.
Yeah, there's a bit more of a genuineness, you could say, whereas with arguments and even writing, people can really refine what they're saying, and it's really ideal, and it presents the best light. Whereas in a fluid conversation, it's not necessarily the person's best well thought out argument. It's more fluid and original.
Right. Well, it reminds me. I just did a presentation for religion, the evolution of religion, yesterday. And I had planned out all these notes that are real, like, in-depth archaeology and anthropology terms and words. And I started talking, and I realized if I do this, I'm going to lose the crowd. I'm going to have to talk in just a real world. So I just kind of like scrapped all the notes, like, okay, we're just going to talk. But the one guy goes, that was the best talk you ever done. And I was like, yeah.
There's, even with like some of my professors, you can tell there's like times where they're kind of like, they have to just go section by section on their notes, but then there's times where they just kind of freelance it, and it's like, they're really into it. It's almost how say Kobe Bryant could be in a really good game, right, where he scores points. By the same token, you could be like in a really good zone where you're just giving a really good presentation with no notes. But yeah, I tend to be more of a kind of a person where I don't necessarily need a step-by-step notes, but maybe a general outline.
Yeah.
Just a direction, because I can ramble, right? I can get off on tangents.
Well, speaking of tangents, the tangents I would like to talk with you are things like the philosophy of science, the theory of knowledge, or the philosophy of knowledge, or whatever. And also things like virtue ethics, morality. Because I think you're an atheist too, right? And so to me, but that's like, okay. And so if we both don't know there's not magic, what does that mean? And what do we do now? Okay, now that's gone. If the whole world, in a sense, agreed that atheism was true, we would need more than that to push the world forward to positive things.
Yeah, I always viewed, so like, if we abandon the principle, or the metaphysics of religion,
right,
we can still take the kind of, the sociological effects of religion, so to say. I think there's still something to be said about the kind of gatherings they have. They talk about their beliefs about reality. I think that's super important. And I think when you look at some political debates, for example, a lack of that kind of discussion leads to just hyperbolic rhetoric where people aren't even talking to each other. It's just, I have this emotional stance and you have that emotional stance, and we're just going to bash emotions, right? We're not going to actually have discussion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And while some people don't want to, like, I'm in a sense, you would say, a far leftist, right? But I'll talk to even far rightists and try to have a real conversation, not just like a, hate fest or something. Because the fact is, I do hope that, if they really have some points, I want to listen to them. That's like this guy said to me about, would you trust, someone who says, here's a blog that has some facts, but that blog is from, Eagle #1 Patriot, American Pride or something. He goes, would you think at those? And I said, well, their facts may be right. I would be questioning their humanity as a possible, but because I don't know that just because you're on the right, you have wrong facts. It's just maybe you're looking at the facts like that we need to, say, remove all health care, in a sense, because it's not making enough money. Well, that would be a capitalist, and as me as an anti-capitalist, I would go, yeah, well, we kind of need to help people regardless of if it makes money.
Yeah, there's, I think what you're getting at is the idea that people, at some point in time, people have went from reasoning with each other and then identifying positions after they had reasoned with each other, to now in which they look at a label and identify with the label and then use arguments that are closest fit to that label.
Yes.
It's not like they're trying to come to a position. It's like they choose the position first and then they try and adhere to that position as hard as possible.
Well, yeah, and to me, the problem is also that they listen to attack. They're not listening to reason.
Yeah.
They're like the data mining. I'm listening. Anything you say, I'm like, data. Okay, aha. Oh. I'm not really going, what are we saying? How can we understand each other better? Or maybe how can we move this forward? No, that's why I said it. I feel like that's a sad thing, though, because our communication, our ability words have power. We could build castles in the sky to protect, or dungeons of torment, and it's really all by words. The same, little packet of ideas, But to me, I think people only think that somehow they only transmit ideas. Yeah, words transmit feelings all the time. In fact, that's almost the main thing they do.
Yeah, if you think about traditional Pavlovian kind of conditioning models, where it's like there's an association with stimulus, and that learned association can sometimes be emotions, right? And you think, for example, you think about cuss words.
Right. Cuss
words are incredibly evocative, and then even there's taboo phrases that you can't say. Sigmund Freud loved to talk about these. They're very interesting, like flatulence, for example. We don't talk about that in the public.
Or voiceness.
Yeah, there's just these negative emotions that we have with certain phrases that are so strong we just don't talk about them in the public. So yeah, the words do kind of convey emotions, and that's I think what good rhetoricians really understand is how to use certain phrases and how to even offering narratives to the same set of facts. You can offer alternative narratives to the same set of facts.
That's what I was trying to say about when he was saying doubt people that are far right. I'm like, that their facts are wrong. I'm like, yeah, they may have facts. I mean, they may not. But I don't assume that. I assume that their interpretation is a selfish interpretation of any facts offered. That's my assumption. I'm not even saying that's 100% correct. I'm just saying that I would not think that they don't have any facts. I would think that, as you said, their narrative of what the facts mean is probably a lot different, and then what to do about it is different.
Yeah, that's what Steven Pinker talked about in one of his lectures about his book Enlightenment Now, and he got in trouble for it from liberals, from which he said that there are innate differences between men and women. And he said that if the left doesn't show up to that kind of, if the left doesn't acknowledge those kinds of facts, it leaves room for the far right to interpret it in a very immoral fashion. Because on its surface value, it's not immoral, right?
I think
there's differences is not.
And I think it's interesting too. When you talk about differences, I always say that to me equals a behavior. So when I say I fight for equality, it's about how you treat people. Imagine if it wasn't. Imagine if everyone had to have, in a sense, some standard to even be acknowledged as human. I mean, we in a sense. Well, I'm just saying. Imagine if we went around and we're like, well, that guy's IQ is only 100. He's not human. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So to me, because you could say, well, then you got. I always say that. Why does it stop there? Why only intelligence? How about behavior? What if we say that these people that behave like this are not human? I mean, throughout time, that has happened. I mean, it might even still be happening. So to me, it really is a point of realizing that we have to me personally, divorce it from some type of characteristics and start seeing what we're talking about. In other words, that we look at axiological for me, we look at the innate value of what we're talking about. What's its ontological value into itself? Then I think of the other value, the extrinsic. What does this thing produce, like behavior? That's what to me morality is, like a behavior exchange in a sense.
I think that's even the distinction between, say, political philosophy and political science is where you're attaching values to facts with political philosophy, whereas political science is only concerned with, say, the mathematical consequences of certain policies, right? They don't really care about what to do with the facts, whereas political philosophy does really care what to do with the facts.
Right, which can make a difference in how you outlook on what you should do, what the facts are, how they should be interpreted, or how they should be valued. Because, like I tell people, to me, value is real important. Because, like, let's say if I think I've said this before to you, but if I say that I'm going to lend you my car, the first thing is that you feel elation. Wonderful, especially if you were asked to use it. Great, what you wanted, it happened. And then I say, yeah, the car's $3 million. Please don't damage it. You're like, whoa, do not want that car. All of a sudden, this thing that had a huge value depending on, and even the car itself is a valuable car, see, it's though its use to you becomes zero because you know that the risk of its damage is more than you could pay in a sense. So you won't even want the car. No, don't even give it to me. I don't ever want to have that the responsibility of that car. So to me, use is a big deal as an axiologist because I see that things can have value and we could all agree on it, but how it could be used could be worlds different.
Yeah, and that's also to go back to your point, like we're looking at the starting point of values, and what it is we're valuing, and how we're using our values to look at the world is an important starting point for any discussion. Because some people might just think, I don't really value U.S. dollars or U.S. currency, or I don't value materials.
Yeah.
And so they'll damage your car, and that might upset you, but to them it's not that big of a deal because the value system is different.
I say you change your values, you change your life, so I know it's all about values. Just like when I went from a theist to an atheist, I was a theist, and axiologically I saw the term theism as having an innate value, that it was referring to an ontological reality being, so that it had value as a real property substance. but then you become an atheist, and I'm like, yeah, that term is meaningless and empty and devoid of actual substantiation for its ontology claims. And let's see, there's no actual justifiable reason for anyone to say they know anything about these supposed ontological claims. Then they're given meaning and value in a world which they haven't even assessed the values of. I don't know how they're possibly doing it. Then they're saying things that are not valuable are valuable, like when they say that if somehow, your daughter is raped, that you should then marry her to her rapist. I don't know that you even need a lot of values to figure out that's not real valuable, especially if you're the one that's being raped. You would certainly not go, yeah, I want that ethics. Woo! That is the perfection ethics right there. No, you'd be like, what kind of monster wrote this? The Taliban?
Yeah, and there's a particular priest that I always watch. I forget his name. He's an Irish priest, and he has a YouTube channel. And he's got like this. He looks like he's Jesus. He literally looks like he's Jesus. But whenever I watch him, it's kind of interesting how he selectively interprets some of these stories to mean something that you wouldn't ever guess in 1,000 years. And it's so abstract and out there that it's interesting because of how he interprets it. It's very original, and I think there's some creativity going on. And he's not dumb. He knows about when he actually includes science into his priestly lectures. Yeah. But the way he interprets these stories is so. And the appeal is just the creativity for me. But you wouldn't ever do that with, say, if you were to do what some of these priests do with the Bible, to say Immanuel Kant, if you read Kant,
or Nietzsche.
Yeah, it's like, if you got that off with some of the interpretations, people would reject you from ever having a conversation about the book ever again. True.
Imagine if it would be like this if they said, yeah, I know he said uber man, but what he really meant was uber feminist. I'm serious. That is exactly only women. In fact, he was a person that was so far against, it's like the reality is like, no, I don't think. I mean, he may not have been like a massive misogynist, but on everything, but yeah, feminist.
It's crazy to think. It's like some people will genuinely interpret philosophy books like that, in that kind of weird, wonky sense. I know with Heidegger, people tend to get a little bit too lost in some of the language, and they just straight up accuse it of Nazism and National Socialism. I think that happens with some of Nietzsche's work too. But yeah, people really do. I don't know if it's just they want to interpret it like that, and there's some kind of bias that they're looking to.
I'm sure there is. No, I think that you identified that. You said, is there? No, we know it's a bias. What you should say is, what we don't know is what bias they have. But they obviously have something. Well, that reminds me in psychology or group counseling, they said, keep the recurrent current. In other words, if somebody keeps repeating the same thing, you expose it, you highlight it, you start breaking it down and finding out why is this keep recurring. Because there is a reason.
Yeah, there's actually, especially with like relationships, you can see a lot of examples of that where it's like you can find patterns in, say, someone's dating behavior and the relationships they have with, say, their parents.
Yeah.
Although I think that kind of reasoning has been, people have taken it to be too Freudian, even though there's some value to it, right? There's some actual mathematics there that there's some predictive evidence
usefulness
that shows. Yeah, that there is some usefulness to it. The interpretation of how that relationship maps out, say like, I know people will say like this is unconscious beliefs. I think you can make it compatible with physicalism, namely that the brain developed physical connections in relation to certain behavioral patterns in the environment, and those are the patterns that you must know, and so those are the patterns you look for in other potential mates, so on and so forth. But people get skeptical of that kind of talk. If you like, some physicists will make fun of like Freudian psychologists for saying like, oh, Freud has like parental issues. He had mommy issues or daddy issues. It's one of the jokes.
Well, I think that probably is not that far actually from the truth. He probably did have those things. So, Yeah, I do think that he was a little less excessive in how I think that, well, this is the thing is that I think that it's not all or nothing. I don't look at ideas as having to be all or nothing, saying that, just because there's something I can't accept them. I mean, I should want to have right reason. And right reason I've heard a few times from religious people, and I've heard a lot of times from philosophy. So, but in general, though, because of that situation, of that reality, I realize the different values. Yeah, I pick my stuff through philosophy, not through religion, which I find a lot less useful for me.
Yeah, even I used to read the Bible for ideas.
Yeah.
And even when I read some of the stories, they're well written stories, but I don't. To me, that because I know there's no claims being made about reality, at least I don't take it that way. It's not as interesting as, say, reading a philosophy book, where they are trying to make claims about reality. For instance, I just ordered some books about the philosophy of economics. Now, I could read fiction books about economics, like Ayn Rand, but Ayn Rand just doesn't entice me because some of her things are fiction, right?
Well, and the ones that are not delusional. So then pick what you like. Either it's just for flavor, or it's somewhat a bad flavor. So go ahead. Right.
Although to be fair towards fiction,
fiction can be good. Fiction can be inspiring. So I'm not putting down fiction. Just putting down her fiction.
Yeah, I was gonna say recently I got into this behavior of watching one movie a week, and one of the things I had watched recently was this, it wasn't a mainstream film, but it was an indie film about AI. And one of the AIs was, it was like a companion with a human. But what the AI would do was it had directives, and it couldn't break any of the directives. And so when the human introduced irrational decision-making or ideas, it would understand the irrationality of it, but since it didn't interfere with its directives, it didn't have any concern. It's wow, that's an interesting kind of way of viewing characters, where it's a significant indifference, right? There's huge indifference from an AI, even though it wouldn't necessarily be an evil indifference. It's just
well, it would be a morality difference in a sense, right? Because it doesn't have the ability. That's like when people said to me, as one guy goes, Damien, you talk about values and stuff, but you understand the universe doesn't care about you. And I said, well, do you understand the universe doesn't contain properties to be able to care about me? And thus, that's as stupid as saying a tree can't write a book. Okay. And?
Yeah, that's such a silly argument, right? I don't understand why people say that. And people do say, I think it's a famous existential saying. Right?
Oh, it is?
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense because, if you're a monist and you think everything is one big
one property,
then the universe does care about you because brains are caring agents. Yeah. And so the brains are part of the universe. Therefore, there are arguments there.
Yeah.
I never understood that. A lot of existentialism just goes over my head, but I tend to be more towards facts anyways. So.
Well, I like that about you, so hey. I don't mind people that can be theoretical. In fact, I love theoretical thinking. I just like it when it relates it back to some normative use. I mean, thinking about things that, unless you're doing it for just the artistic thing of thinking for fun, I want to have problem solved so we can have it be useful and beneficial.
Yeah, the more towards pragmatic use.
Yeah, I like pragmatics. So yeah, well, I think all knowledge starts in pragmatics. For me though, the difference is I don't see that as the only thing you have to use. I think knowledge kind of builds on itself. So to me, I think that starts everything kind of a pragmatic theory of truth. In a sense, you just have to go from just plain thinking to figure out an organization to get to right thinking, which I think is reason. But there's certainly something different than just thinking and reason. They're not the same. So they're distinct. So I think that you kind of figure that out pragmatically because you don't start with pre-knowledge. Because I don't believe that we have some kind of a lot of pre-knowledge other than we have an awareness ability to assess the environment. But I think that still is just
that's an interesting topic that some cognitive scientists, where I guess, I'm not sure, there's a guy named Jerry Fodor who writes cognitive science and philosophy of mind books. Yeah. I don't know if I call him a philosopher or a cognitive scientist, although I think he recently passed away. What he talks about is 50,000 innate ideas, where there's 50,000 pieces of knowledge that we have, or concepts, 50,000 innate concepts. And some people don't like to take that argument too seriously, because what he's saying is that genes have the ability for abstraction, which is a big claim for genetic material, because genetic material is supposed to be very simple, right? Because a lot of our learning does come from the environment. But at the same time...
Well, but I would agree that some animals are certainly born with an innate difference, because look at how some animals can walk and some can't. I mean, I think that the fact that we are animals. So I think one of the things is, if you see mammals that have a wider or ability to give birth, in a sense, where their pelvis can spread wider, say, than a human female, because she stands upright. That really messes evolution. There has to give up something, because you're allowing them to do this. That actually makes the vaginal very small. So the baby really doesn't do a good job of barely coming out. So the problem is, because of that, the baby has to, in a sense, be born premature. So in a sense, to me, all babies and humans are premature. That's why we have to nurture them so much. But to me, that also tells why I feel humans have that nurturing, thing, and also the selfishness. Because just think, if you were a mother and you have to use universal ethics or virtue ethics or something, or unitarian, ethics in a sense, where you're going to go ahead and everybody's greater good always matters. No mother would be able to take care of their own child and feel ethical. That's ridiculous. So to me, that the part of that selfishness is the realization that axiologically we cannot take care of the world. I mean, it just flat out, we're limited. There's not copies of Jordan just pass around. So
yeah, that's one of the actually that you mentioned, that one of the idea that when people say that they're going to do something for the world, it's usually an indicator of like a psychological compensation for something.
Yeah.
Because they are limited to some extent.
Yeah. And so, if they don't realize that, it's like, wow, really?
and so it's like they're trying to do more than what they actually can do, and so there must have been something that has pushed them to that position, even though it's an irrational position, right? So there has to be it's one of the things that psychologists look for, is like these kind of extreme beliefs or extreme ideas like that, where it's like, oh, I'm going to cure the world. It's like, okay, so what happened to you in the past?
Yeah. I do think that a lot of people that are really against injustice, at least in my own personal experience, have all experienced injustice themselves. Like, I'm a real champion for kindness, not because I woke up one day and I'm this nice, peaceful person. Actually, it's the exact opposite. I was brutalized as a child. And so I grew up in gang environments and stuff, and I've been, shot at and stabbed and jumped at a zoo on a school outing at 13 or whatever. So, you come from that kind of environment, and it's hard not to just default into that. Okay, this is how we're supposed to act. But I really realized that, just think about it. What if everyone was for war? Let's just say everybody. We're all for war. War is the best thing. I'm going to just say war is the best thing. If that was true, then war would never stop. Just think about it. It made me think, well, then what is the goal of war? Is it for war, or is it actually for peace? And I feel like, in a sense, for me, the goal even of war should be, our goal should be peace. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if one has the mind, in a sense, of a warrior, if you don't also have a heart of kindness, I feel like you've forgotten why we do war is not to make war, but for it to end so we can go back to living in peace, to me.
I guess I would say it depends on who you're asking that question to.
Well, yeah, the Vikings would have a different opinion. I'm talking about now. I'm saying now, most reasonable people that are not psychologically disturbed somehow, are generally going to, have a sense that they want peace and they want their child to have peace and their grandchild or whatever. So most people, or even like just say, like you, so let's say you didn't have no kids, you're not married, nothing. Well, you probably have some relatives, some grandchildren. I mean, not grandchildren, I mean, nephews or whatever somebody. You probably have somebody that you care about, or friends even. So I don't see that most people would really say, yeah, I want to endanger the lives of me or the ones I care about. Not if they're being rational.
That would bring up an interesting moral question, in which you could say, on the one hand, if you don't go to war, in the theoretical world, on the one hand, if you don't go to war, your economy collapses and people start starving to death.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you do go to war, maybe you only lose a fraction of the lives you're going to lose from this massive hunger that's about to strike your economy. Right, so then, and maybe you could argue from the utilitarian perspective that you should go to war. That it's actually the moral thing to go to war.
Well, yeah, I'm not a pacifist. I'm an atheist for non-aggression. So I think that if we should not try to be the aggressor. So to me, I think that violence is acceptable if it's for self-defense or other defense. I just don't like preemptive violence. In other words.
Well, that was one of the questions I never, so like, I remember telling that I make the distinction between, say, on the micro, person-to-person interactions and on the macro, greater benefit for most people. If there were a situation where, if you didn't preemptively attack another country and your whole entire, say, half the world's population was going to starve to death if you didn't preemptively attack somebody, that would be a hard situation to be in, right?
But if we had that mentality of just what you said, we didn't talk about the actors involved, then we need to go against corporations now. I mean, if that was true, the 1% is already waging a class war, and if I had that ethic, the ethic that you talked about that you had presented, then I would say as a leftist, I should be at absolute war with these people because they are doing what you just said. They are allowing 50% of the world to starve.
Right, so you know what's interesting is like there was I think it was Jaco Fresco, I think his name is, and he gave a lecture where he talked about how he lived through the Great Depression. And he said he was at a city where people were in food lines and they were starving. And just about a mile away, there was just food not being touched. But the only reason it wasn't moving is because nobody was being paid to move it.
Well, yeah.
No money.
Well, that's why I think that I'm not against money. I just think that money right now is used against people, like leveraged against them to promote power. And I think that money should be used for people.
What actually is, from like all the recent political events that have happened, what I have noticed is one of the things that's really used against people is, like it's a cliche saying, but a lack of education.
Oh, totally. Oh, that's why people like you need to be on my show, and I need to, get your voice out there, and because we do need educated people to talk, and then other people just need to listen because they're not educated. I mean, there's nothing, I think, wrong with not being educated, but that to me personally, there's something wrong with wanting to not be educated. Or feeling that it's not important. Like, yeah, it's very important.
The amount of, like, for instance, I recently been in a debate with somebody about, there's this campaign going, Walk Up, Not Out, about school shootings.
Oh, yeah.
And the person that was arguing with me was retorting with rhetoric and emotionally charged statements, and it didn't bother me. But the fact that that person bought into the rhetoric of someone's political stance tells me that they didn't even reason to their conclusion. They just felt emotionally to their conclusion, and that to me is like that's really dangerous.
Well, yeah, that's why I know we're, in a sense, neurology tells us we're always emoting. Like there's no reason devoid of emotions, including the International Critical Thinking Association. There's a book that I really liked called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and the lady in there, she Well, that lady in there, she almost eviscerates him on the fact that how motions are not disconnected from critical thinking. I mean, oh man, it was so brutal. If someone wrote that about me, I'd want to cry, and then I would thank them for helping me see the error of my ways, because that's the only response I could think you would want to say after you read. She gives like, I don't know, like 8 pages of like just ripping him in half about what. I'm like, oh, it was intelligent and it was brutal. I was like, woo, only thing I felt good is, man, it's not about me. Whoa, man.
That view comes from, it stems from rationalist philosophy, where they say we got to use our rationality.
Right.
And it really has stemmed all the way into modern times. And even, there's a neuropsychologist, Antonio Damasio. He writes,
I've heard of them.
He's between philosophy and neuroscience or neuropsychology, and he has a book called Descartes' Error, where he talks about his PhD. I think it was his PhD thesis called the somatic marker hypothesis, where he looks at how there are certain feelings that the body gets that are actually incorporated in reasoning. It's like the notorious example is the gut feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that's really anxiety. He said was one of those things too.
Well, that's really great, because I think I told you before that how I make my theory of knowledge up from all the base presupposition is feelings. In other words, I feel like events or stimulus occurs. Feelings are the response to stimulus. Thinking originates out of feelings, like by default. When you experience feelings, you're going to start thinking. If I punch you, you're immediately, what do I do about this? Without trying to think, you automatically, in a sense, kind of go into that thing. So thinking occurs, and then from thinking, and then I think right thinking, which we can arrange from a pragmatic stance, we get to, reason, and then right reason, pragmatically, we can get to logic. I think once you're there, to me, then it leads into a different type of theory of truth. Because I think once you have logic, in a sense, you now have a different standing or a standard to then push off from. Even though it's, in a sense, also using a pragmatic, which I feel like people don't realize. Logic starts in pragmatics because it has axioms. Axioms came from what exactly? Magic? Or did it come from just guessing?
They're pretty pragmatic, aren't they?
Well, no, that's all they are. It's I tell people, they go, oh, well, Damien, you need to understand logic. And I was saying, you need to understand pragmatics because you're missing something. Well, no, I'm not. I'm logic. I'm like, and how do you know what's logic? How do you know what is the ontology of logic? And how do you know that? I mean,
it's one of the reasons why I think it was Bertrand Russell mentions, I think it's in his Mathematica Philosophy. It's one of his books, maybe, but he says anybody who entertains absolute skepticism is a disingenuous philosopher or is being disingenuous in his philosophy.
Wonderful, I agree. I've told them that before. I said, I've never once seen a true solipsist because they're all acting like naive realists.
Yeah.
Because what's dangerous to me is so interesting. People have like ideas and they think that they're like a spider that's just floating out in the air. Well, every spider is connected to a web, and that always grounds to the reality of the world. And that's, I see reason too. Every idea you have is not original. It is not disconnected. It is an actual web of ideas supporting that idea. It cannot exist otherwise. And the lack of you, not you personally I'm talking about, but I'm saying them, most people, the lack that you don't realize this when you talk is absolutely amazing to me. It's dumbfounding, actually. I go, really? I think sometimes people are joking. You got to be joking, right? Because like when someone said, I believe in no values at all. I'm a nihilist. And I'm said, it seems like you're pushing that quite strongly. It must have some value. And he's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, that presupposes all values are conscious to begin with, which I think we can all agree that that's not the case.
Exactly.
And even the fact that there was a famous study where they looked at comparable big name companies.
Yeah.
And the one that had the smaller or the shorter name on average did 10% better than the one that had the longer name, even if they were almost identical companies, right? So we have these unconscious influences.
Oh, totally. That reminds me, you said that reminds me, there's a psychological study they did. They wanted to see like how people behave about portions. So they said, we're going to give stale popcorn. They made sure it was like 3-day-old. This stuff almost deserved to be thrown on the ground and stepped on it. I
by the ethics board.
Right, yeah. So they give them old popcorn. I know, really. They give them stale popcorn. They know it's stale. So they give them the stale popcorn, and they give it in small little containers first. And they give it free. Here's a small container. Everyone can get one. And they said the people will eat like a little bit of it, but not that much, right? In small container. They give a medium container. They just want to see if the container size. They give a medium container popcorn, right? Then people actually ate almost half worth of the first time. Because the more you give people, then they feel like they have to eat more. So they ate more of this disgusting popcorn simply because the container size got bigger. So then they thought, wait a minute. We're going to have another one. So they had a bigger size, like a gigantic. And they're like, we're giving away gigantic popcorn. This is such a deal. It's free. People ate almost all the popcorn, and it was terrible. And it's like they were saying how much bias we have when we think we're getting a deal.
Yeah. There's a lot of very, very interesting ideas in social psychology and kind of psychology, influence psychology. Very, very fascinating, and a lot of the time the unconscious biases we have are so simple that you're like, there's no way I'm going to fall for it. And then like 3 months later, you're like, wait a second.
Oh, yes. Well, and I actually try to hijack people's biases and use them in creative but not harmful ways. Like, I know that people have a bias that the more you see someone's face, the more you trust them, regardless. Mm-hmm. Regardless if you know anything about them, just the actual fact of. But I believe it has to do with like in our ancestry, that we're pair bonding or group bonding. Imagine if we have to be around someone at a cave. Me and you got to be around. I don't know you, but I see you all the time. I start to trust. Okay, I trust because you're part of the clan in a sense. You're us now, not other. I think it might have to do with that bias or attaching to that. But what I try to do though is then put my face everywhere. Like I draw art, I almost always try to make sure it's my face because I know that seeing me has an impact on your biases.
I actually have a book called Positioning, and it's a marketing book, and they talk about how basically the premise of the book is how to fight for unconscious positions in the consumer's mind.
Right on. So tell us some. That sounds really super interesting.
And one of the things they talk about is Disney. How Disney actually was really good at doing this, right?
Yes.
If you think about Disney, right away you have this image in your head.
Oh, definitely.
A little mouse. And that's not like an innate thing. That's an environmentally learned thing.
Yeah.
You can almost go anywhere in the world. And the second you mention Disney, people think of this black silhouette of a mouse, right? Or Apple is really good at it too. With Apple, they have the bite out of the apple.
Which I always think was funny about the apple because it's not just a bite an apple. Isn't it how generally have the different rainbow colors?
Some
do, right? But I know you're talking about the shape. But I was saying, so once again, they're trying to put double symbolism because the apple itself is symbol, and then putting a colors and stuff adds to another message they're trying to transmit. So I'm just saying, they're multiple messaging.
And even on Amazon, they're known for smiley faces on their logos.
They are?
They have if you look at the bottom of their logo.
Those of which I pay attention, right? You're like, wow, Damien, for a smart guy, you sure don't pay attention very often.
Oh, you can't really pay. You won't notice these things. It's just so. Even if you go to McDonald's, I actually before I had to explain. Like I never thought about this, but one time I went and I explicitly counted how many times they put their logo, and the one by my house has it. I think about 26 times before you even get into the store. It's ridiculous, right?
But branding does work, though. Unfortunately, it does. That's why they keep doing it. That's why, like I said, I realized, hey, why aren't I doing it?
I mean, you need a logo, and you got to put it everywhere.
Yeah, I got a logo. It's my red beard.
And then when you get sued for brainwashing, I think Disney got sued for brainwashing. They actually had to reduce the amount of logos they had in their parks.
Oh, really?
30%. Yeah, they got sued for brainwashing.
Well,
and their sales dropped, by the way, when they reduced their logos. So it does work.
Dang, I think that's pretty oppressive. It's brainwashing. How can you get sued for brainwashing? That's like, what is it, thought police? I mean, I do agree that. Well, because my first thing would be, is it harmful? Is it like the people that are experiencing this, is it harmful? Because if it's not harmful, then I would have very little well then who cares?
Well, the argument was that it was so persuasive that it was almost like coercing people out of their money.
Then all art is that. I mean, so all artists to get all this money, or all people that do sports. I hate sports. I think sports is for me personally, anyone that likes sports, I'm not trying to make a global claim. I'm just saying personally, to me, I find sports to be a complete waste of time. Watching them, waste time. Doing them, waste time. For me, whole thing, complete and utter waste of time. For me. So for me, the value is like zero. It's a minus value. When I even hear sports on, it irritates my mind to hear whatever. It's like, oh, come on. Just for me, I'm saying. I just hear like la 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 la, and I'm like.
I think Freud gives an analysis. I'm not sure in which book, but he talks about. I forget which book, but he talks about sports as a cathartic release for public aggression. So, like, if you think about
for that's its use. There you go. I'll agree with that. For me, that would be the only use. All right.
Like
How productive that is, I don't know, but
football really is kind of like a war in a sense, where it's people dressing up in uniforms and trying to beat each other at the game, right? It really is, to some extent, war. A simulation of war, you could say. And
you're like, and I like it, Damien, so go screw off, right?
You know what?
You don't like sports either? No. Well, do you find it interesting, since you're more in the philosophy, as far as school and college is concerned? Because I never took any philosophy classes in college. So, but would you say that more people that are into philosophy than that, would you say, or that are thinkers, are they equally like the general population into sports, or are they like us and kind of go, nah?
I would have to. That's one of those situations where it's like, I don't really trust my anecdotal reasoning, because.
Well, no, I wasn't giving you reasoning. Like, is that I wasn't making a claim for the whole world. I'm just asking your experience.
Yeah. So, like, in my experience, maybe like 66% of the time, they don't really care for sports. But then I recently had a philosophy of language professor who was just obsessed with hockey. Yeah. Like, he just loves hockey. And he was a smart guy. He's really
well.
He knows Bertrand Russell better than I do.
Yeah, but I wasn't saying that people that like sports have to not be smart. Of course they could. I was just saying that the tendency, like, is there, like, and there was like, if I came to you and I said, I'm really into sports and all this, would you immediately go, well, then he must like philosophy? You know what I'm saying? There's not that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, he must be literature major. You would not. No, probably not. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe if you were like in a marketing course, I might assume you're into sports. Especially since the job market for marketing is really, there's a lot of it in sports.
Well, yeah. So I that's what I meant. I wasn't putting a put down. I was just making an acknowledgement. It doesn't seem like those two would generally, you would think of, go together.
Yeah, because usually there's like the Jungian archetype of an intellectual. And intellectuals tend not to be socialites, right? They're this kind of recluse bookworms in that sense. And that's the kind of archetype that I would agree that, that I would think generally a philosophy major is someone who's like reads books, smokes cigarettes, drinks
coffee or tea.
Like Christopher Hitchens, for example, he was
or alcohol.
The archetypal intellectual for me, like the perfect intellectual.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're, for me, you have a lot of qualities that makes a really good intellectual. I don't like the word perfect, because I don't really totally believe in that concept, because that sounds, not saying you can't be good or that he wasn't good, but that perfect, yeah. For me, I would not, I don't give him the classification of person. I don't worship Christopher Hitchens either. Like, I know some atheists totally think that he was the greatest. Okay, I think that, for me, if we're going to ask who's a hero in a sense for atheism, it would be, Ingersoll, not Hitchens, for me. But that's just me.
I don't know who I would go with, because Dennett does a really good job, but I think Dennett doesn't do a good job at appealing to the public because his arguments are so, they're thought experiments. Most of his arguments are based on his thought experiments. And what he does is he gets you to answer yes or no to some certain thought experiment, and then he gets you to answer yes or no from another thought experiment. And if you agree yes, then you therefore agree to his conclusion. Or it's like, and I don't think that's a good way to go with the public because the public I think it's too abstract and out there. Whereas I think maybe someone like Hitchens, where he's a bit his language is very pretentious, but I think he gets to the core issues. Is what I like about him. That's the thing I liked about him is he really gets to the arguments that you want to hear. Yeah. So like if your God is so benevolent, or even if your God did exist, I wouldn't want him anyways because he's not a very benevolent one. It's like, yeah, that's a good point. Right?
Well, to me, that particular point is an axiological point because you're addressing basically you're holding them to a moral standard, or you're addressing the problem of evil, and then you're saying that because there is the problem of evil, in the world in a sense, the suffering occurs, and unwanted suffering certainly occurs. And I make the point about this too. There's a place in Africa where they're both under, in a sense, massive drought, and thus because that child death is high. And they also have not very good medical. Well, one side, and there's a border in between these two countries, one side is like 95% Christian, the other side is like 98% Muslim. But the death rate is equal. That should alone tell you that either they're, both equally, God is hateful, which they both say the opposite, then their God is murdering children at no different rate, no matter your belief. That to me should question belief right there. And you can't tell me that these devout people aren't praying. You know what I'm saying? So the prayers are not answered if they're being answered in your belief that at any different rate. Then you have to remember that you're looking at this, but this is a God who's not even letting these babies do anything but be born and die, because I'm talking about the death rate in the first week of birth. This is any God that would kill off a week-old baby just brought to life to torture it. I mean, that is immoral as far as for I could as hell, if that was a true being.
Yeah, it's the argument that's like that's an evil dictator. That's not that's actually when I was like, I remember when I was 16 or 15, I remember distinctly watching Hitchens on stage debating some of these people, right? And that was a lot of the arguments came along the lines of the good versus evil kind of arguments, in which he pointed out this sheer evil of religion. There's just sheer evil all over religious documents. And even some of the practices that they do in modern times are quite questionable. Like Richard Dawkins points out, child indoctrination and lies, right? So like when you tell a kid that the Earth is 6,000 years old, you're fundamentally lying to him.
Well, even they usually do worse, because then they keep the kid from learning that the world has evolution. So not only do they tell them the lie, they keep them from the truth, which is, I think, another violation. It's like intellectual abuse. And I do think imagine if you said there's no intellectual things the duty of parents have, Really? I don't think anyone would say that. I mean, seriously. No one would say that the parent has no obligation to teach a child anything. You would say, no, I don't feel good about that. So you realize that you're being honest, you realize that intellectual responsibility is a part of being a parent. So you can have intellectual abuse. And I think keeping them from truth while actively teaching them lies, I don't know what else would qualify for intellectual abuse but that. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, it's literally indoctrination. And if you look at sometimes there is this gray area where a religious cult is no different from a normal religion.
Yeah, like almost all of them at some point and in some way.
That's one of the things I really liked about Freud, and I think that a lot of people missed out on. because of his perception of being like really idiosyncratic. I think it's Karl Popper just ruined his career because of that. Nobody's read his other books that had nothing to do with, but they do have some psychoanalytic pepperings in them.
Yeah.
But they're not really about psychoanalytics. They're about like religion and society.
Oh yeah, like Totem and Taboo, right? Wasn't that book you did?
Yeah, and then there's Civilizations and Its Discontents, which Hitchens loved a lot too. He talks about religion and Freedom of Illusion. That's a really good one. I've read that one like 3 times now.
Yeah, speaking of which, I would really want to hear your atheism, because I know what mine is. I want to hear your atheism. Like, how would you describe it? What would you say that it started? And could you tell us, like, what you think? Is it going somewhere, or is it stagnant? I mean, just let me know.
Well, not
that putting you on the spot.
Where it started. It started pretty much when maybe I was grade 6, maybe.
Wow.
I distinctly remember that there was just people talking, and that what they were saying was bullshit. I didn't genuinely like think it was like, oh, this is just bullshit. Like I just thought like that this was just like it was meaningless stuff.
Right.
There's no use for it to me.
Right.
It was almost like a pragmatic feeling that I remember. Whenever we were forced to go to church, because I went to a Catholic school.
Right.
I remember looking at the paintings. I was more interested in the paintings than I would the lectures. I actually don't remember much of the teachings they taught me. In fact, I don't remember any of it. And so it started very young. And then probably about 14, 15, when I got introduced to the Four Horsemen, that's when I was like, okay, their arguments are so much better. What am I wasting my time with, right? And then from there, I would say that I'm pretty much a radical pragmatist. I don't think any human will ever have a truth. And so because of that, I just think we have theories that are more. So
do you think no human would have any kind of truth, or you just mean no truth about the God question? I'm just clarifying what you would.
I don't think any human will have. No human will reach a truth that is absolutely the case.
Right. So do you believe in epistemic truth and psychological truth, or what is you saying?
So what I'm saying is that the human brain isn't. What I would say is that the human brain is not capable of actually having a genuine certainty about one of their beliefs. There's always room for skepticism, and when you introduce that skepticism,
which I would just call fallibilism, because I hate skepticism. But go ahead. Well, I understand. I was joking. Go ahead.
So I have to add something nuanced to this after. So you could, I think, based on my observations and my experiences with reasoning, the probability that I've developed subjectively is that there's always room for skepticism, and you just need to find it, or fallibilism, and including that very belief that I just iterated. That could actually be wrong.
Yeah,
that very
I
belief
agree.
So I'm not like, it's not like I'm absolutely certain. It's just
because but that's being open to intellectual honesty.
Yeah.
So because in other words, I think you could say right now we're having a conversation. You know that I believe 100%, or at least as much as epistemically you can know that we were having a conversation 100%. So like what I feel like when people say 100%, and they're really talking normative. They're not talking about some theoretical farthest end of knowledge, philosophical stance. No, they're really meaning that the fact I know I'm talking to you right now is good enough. And so, but I do agree that to me we should know that spider is not just floating in the wind; it's actually attached to something. It looks like it's flying, but it's not flying. It's actually in a web. And I think that the blind that people have about all the presuppositions, I do like about you, because you seem a lot more concerned with thinking about your thinking, like meta thinking.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I read books, is because I want to develop. But this is like a conversation I used to just have with somebody. It's like, they were talking about what's the purpose of a degree, or what's the purpose of doing research, and they were saying that it was like, for them it was to just to get a job and have employment. But I was thinking, like, man, that's to me it's like if I choose to what I'm going to do is fun, which I think the degrees are meant for fun to me.
Yes.
Like it's a way to change your worldview. Then the basic necessities for life will follow from that. And so, yeah, I was always more oriented towards ideas from like day one, where it's like, I'm more concerned about how I'm thinking. And if I'm not changing how I'm thinking, then something's wrong. Like half the beliefs I've told you in the last discussion we've just had have been recent beliefs I've developed over the last 2 years. I haven't had them since I was 14, 12, or 18, right? These are more recent beliefs that I've developed as a result of reading. Even reading Adam Smith, someone in economics, has changed some of my beliefs about psychology. Right?
Well, but I think that I feel like that I try to be a thinking aficionado. In other words, that I try to really broaden my thinking and not just limit it. Like I know psychology, but I also want to know the sociology and criminology and anthropology and archaeology and science and philosophy and poetry and art. I want to know all of it because I feel like, well, because if I asked you like what part of life makes life, all of it. So how much can I cut out and think I'm really getting a good, swath of what life is? I just don't know how that you can truly do that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I wanted to write an article about this. I actually want to write a book about this, but I just don't have the time right now. But I noticed that as a result of reading across so many disciplines, there are core. So basically. In cognitive linguistics, they talk about conceptual metaphors, particularly George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. And what conceptual metaphors are is these kind of central ideas that you use in your life, and you reason around these central ideas. So the example I think I've mentioned to you before is argument is war, where you use the experience of an argument or the experience of war to characterize arguments. So when we say, I shot down their argument, or he's attacking my position, right?
I mean, what I need to stop doing. Yeah, go ahead.
and from that, I've noticed that in other disciplines, those conceptual metaphors show up a lot. And so I think this even relates back to some of Kant's ideas, but Kant doesn't have it so well laid out, probably because of the limitations of his time. But there's like these universal conceptual architectures
I agree.
Can be found not necessarily in content, but in in functional form.
Or certainly like they're presumed or seemingly presumed presuppositions. In other words, like they had to have used that architecture, otherwise how the hell did they get there? Flu?
Yes. So one of the things they talk about is causation as a conceptual architecture. That's what Lakoff in The Philosophy in the Flesh talks about causation as metaphorical, right? It's a metaphor. And so causation shows up in a lot of different disciplines. And so that's just one example of universal kind of architectures. Or even if you think about containment, with the idea that we can put something inside of a box and we understand that it's contained inside that box. Well, if you look at, say, how a cellular biologist does his research, genes are contained inside the nucleus of the cell, right? So containment's being used even in cellular biology. That kind of cognitive architecture is being used in a biologist's position. And so for me, that's even how it's influenced completely how I view science as well, where science is really us using our architecture in different ontologies. The ontology of a molecular biologist is different from the ontology of a psychologist.
And that's why back to my hammer of truth, which is my little quick thing especially for people that are not philosophers, which is the use of 3 types of philosophy to actually navigate truth. And that is ontology, epistemology, and then axiology, always in that order. You always demand the ontology. What are you talking about? I want all its properties, all its qualities. Because to me, then you can know how they could know that or not. If your claim is too in-depth, then I'm like, how possibly do you know that God has a little pinky finger that you say has painted pink? How possibly can you know that? You know what I'm saying? So because I got a good ontology, I can then use that in a sense for them. And same with thought. Like if you say, well, everybody's inherently evil. We know when science knows this. And I'm like, well, how do you know that? But I first want to understand what claim are you really making first. So to me, it's real important. The ontology has got to come first. You got to. What are you? You have to identify, because what happens is generally, I feel like, especially in debate, you'll say, "Oh well, Ayn Rand's book is great," and I was like, "What?" But instead of asking your ontology of what that means, you're like, "Great at ruining minds," but I didn't know that. All I heard was great, and so I'm like, what? But see, because my ontology was assuming something different. So I try to know that I need to focus on what's the real ontology we're both having, because it may not match.
Yeah, it's very easy to talk past people, especially with concepts that relate to different levels of complexity.
Yes.
Like if you're talking about, say, crime on a psychological level, well, you're going to be using knowledge that's fundamentally different than crime, say, on a sociological level. And so if you're having a conversation about, or a debate about crime, and you're referencing different levels of complexity, you're just going to talk past each other. There's going to be no coherent communication being undergone. And sometimes you won't even know you're talking past each other as well, which is really the difficulty in sometimes debating people who are more emotionally involved in the conversation than perhaps reason would allow.
Like often? Well, I think that, because otherwise are you saying that all people have reason in conversations? Yeah, I don't think so. I think let's go back to your default right there. Yeah, I think most conversations are probably not built off of a whole lot of reason. I think that's the problem, really. The communication is lack of reason.
It's not that every conversation has to be based on reason, because then...
Well, no, I'm not saying it has to be, but certainly... So I would say for me, I feel like often our thinking is illogical. I mean, often. That's why we got to keep identifying errors, because we are fallible. I feel like constantly. Like, we think we have this vision of ourselves as somewhat perfect. Like you're talking about perfect either. Well, some people say they're imperfect, but generally they get mad if you call them imperfect because they still think they're perfect, in a sense, or close to it, or certainly aiming that way or whatever. And that may be totally not the case. And I think that we need to really learn to accurately assess value. Am I really that good?
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of the old example that I always give to people about how if you point out anyone's flaws, even if they're factually the case, they just get really, really upset. And I remember talking in the class about cognitive science with one of my professors. Or the class was having a discussion, and one of the students was talking about cognitive offloading, which is this idea that you externalize some of your memory. So, say you, instead of memorizing, you have to do something at 4, you put it inside your phone, right? And the professor was like, well, that's not a cognitive process. And I kind of interjected and said, well, no, yes, it is. In fact, there was a book called Cognition in the Wild, written, I believe, sometime in the 80s, I could be wrong, but it was dedicated to this kind of notion about embodied cognition, and how that, in fact, is a form of cognition.
Yeah,
right? And
I agree.
So
I'm not disagreeing with that.
It's factually the case that she just got really upset because what I was doing was I was telling her she's wrong.
I know. I did the same thing. I did the same thing in my first ever. I never even heard of critical thinking. First class critical thinking. That almost not the first word, but the first certain paragraph. The guy said, "I'm like, excuse me." That I don't know about critical thinking, but it doesn't sound like what you said, can go together. And then he's like, oh, well, I've said this for, 20 years. And I'm like, no one's ever said anything. I'm like, does that mean that it's true? Oh, he was like, are you using critical thinking right now to demonstrate the truth of this thing, or you're just stating it from argument from what, populum?
Yeah, I had the luck of having a really good critical thinking teacher. When I say really good, it's not that he was really good at. It's not like he was good at argumentation theory or logic or symbolic logic, but he was just really open to being wrong. And so when we had class discussions about things, he made sure that he had premises and conclusions for his lectures, and he was really into it, right? And because he knew he could be wrong, so he was like, okay, well, we have smart students here, I need to make sure I'm right. So he laid out his presentations with premise 1, premise 2, conclusion, premise 3, premise 4, conclusion, and when students spoke, if you didn't have a premise or conclusion, a premise with your conclusion wasn't supported by the premises,
right, he
would call it out, and so students would make sure that they came prepared with real arguments. And I feel like Ivy Class should be taught like that.
Oh yes.
I think it isn't because it takes more time to actually lay out an argument. Like, it's one thing to understand premises, but to actually lay out an argument that logically follows from your premises is really difficult, especially with complex ideas. Like, even Adam Smith's really good at this. If you read one of his chapters, it's like premise after premise after premise, then he draws a conclusion. But you would never get his conclusion from his premises, and it's because his premises are all over the place. But when you read his conclusion, it's kind of like, oh, that ties it all together. I get what he's saying.
Right.
And that's a skill. That's a really difficult skill to master. That I think goes beyond the pay grade or the paid hours of work that would any professor would have. So that's why I don't think any.
Well, yeah, I think that especially philosophy, but all school, should be, to me, to teach thinking, to teach, enlightenment in a sense, by the way of knowledge, not just teach professions. I think that it gets so collegiate or whatever that it's missing out on the wonderful art of learning. Because I think it's an art. That's why I really like, your type of thinking, that I feel like you and me, it feels like, both approach it more as an art than just a science. The thinking I'm talking about. The thought itself is an art. It has a beauty to it. It's a complexity that we can find out, and it's enjoyable to see it. At least it is for me, definitely. I love when I crack that egg and I can go, ooh, I see its parts.
I think people don't actually learn how to think, and because they don't learn how to think, they don't see the enjoyment of thinking. At least this is my anecdotal evidence, right? Because at the university I go to, a lot of the students are more concerned with just memorizing the core concepts and then putting it back out in the test. But most of the time, like, for instance, in one of my economics classes, we talked about how marginal utility and how you can substitute purchases of products to maximize your marginal utility. And when I learned about that, I incorporated it right away into my how I read books, for example. So if I read, say, 5 psychology books, well, a 6th one might not give me as much fun if I read, say, one economics book, right? So there might be a greater gain from one economics book in terms of enjoyment, rather than reading the 6th psychology book. So the marginal utility would be higher if I rotated, right? If I substituted objects. Well, my friends don't incorporate the marginal utility theory into anything they do. And they spent a lot of time learning it, but they just don't use it at all.
Right.
So it's like they're not thinking.
Yeah, no.
They haven't learned how to think with it.
But I think that you're addressing even beyond thinking, because I think that some people are thinkers, and then some people, which I think I am, and it sounds like you are now that hearing you talk about it more, that I'm a theoretical thinker, not just a thinker. In other words, I mean, like, there's thinkers and there's really deep thinkers that are actually going to come up with new original ideas. And I would say that I think that you are coming up with original ideas, and I am glad to hear you're going to write books. I plan on writing books too, but I think that it is important. I love original ideas.
Yeah, even one of the things I'm going to talk to my economics professor tomorrow is one of the struggles I'm going to have with I'm considering going to graduate school for economics, right? And if I do that, one of the struggles that I'm going to have is finding a graduate school that will entertain my research ideas for economics. because there isn't really a field that focuses primarily on what I want to do, and it's in part because it's new research that involves complex systems. But what I'm doing is fundamentally changing how you view an economic system.
See, that's great.
It is, and it's fun. It's really fun.
It is fun.
Not everything is laid out in front of you, right? Whenever you have a new original idea, you don't know where to go, and you don't know where to start. And so you have to sit down and think, and then you'll get one idea, and then you have to think some more from that one idea to the next, and then you have like a whole network of ideas. Yeah.
Well, really once again, you build a web. Because it all takes those presuppositions, is like I'm talking about. How do we get to what I feel like we can say we know knowledge is by a web of justified, somewhat valid and reliable presuppositions, which is what you're talking about. Building up all these things that allow us to go, okay, we understand, and we can utilize it better when we understand.
And that's what, to some extent, university educations are, is that they give you... it's almost like programming, where it's like they offload a given set of ideas and a given set of ways to view the world onto you, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but it's also not the greatest thing in terms of being an original thinker.
True. In fact, there's a thing called uncollege. No, seriously, it's an anarchist thing. It's called uncollege. And basically the statement is, it's by college students, but the statement is basically that what you're just saying, that college is such an evasive thing into your mind. Even if you're a leftist, I mean, you should care about this. Someone is getting into your mind and they're taking over your ideas. You should care about that, period, no matter who the hell is the one doing it. You should be the one in control of yourself, to me.
And that's one of the things I really liked about economics, is that it's in psychology they just tell you what's the case. They don't let you. There's no room for argument, right?
Right.
And it's in economics there's no room for argument either, because that's mostly a bureaucratic issue. But in economics, they're very clear about what they're assuming. They actually will spend half of the chapter telling you what assumptions they're about to make in order to reach their conclusions. Yeah. And it's because that most of them use mathematical modeling, and so in mathematics, if you don't understand the assumptions, you're not going to get anywhere close to the conclusion.
Well, I think that's true just in general, that no one else is just doing that. That doesn't mean that it's any different for anything else. It's just they're too stupid or choose not to do it.
Yeah. I think another thing too is in other disciplines you can really get away with it, because you can explain the conclusion without explaining the premises. Whereas what we see, even the idea I was explaining to you about marginal utility, in order to understand marginal utility, you have to understand substitution between products and utility gained from each product, right?
Right.
So you have to understand that before you can even understand the greater concept, right? So in other words, you got to understand the axiology, value structure, and the value judgments before you can start making value judgments and call them accurate or good. And what's interesting too is, like, now that I'm thinking about this, one of the books that I'm looking at called Philosophy of Economics.
Yeah.
One of the chapters is criticisms of the marginal utility theory, and I'm actually excited to read it.
Right on. Well, I mean, to me, a good thinker, to me, does not just want their ideas proved. They want to know what's true. And so, to me, then it shouldn't matter. Sometimes you could be true. Maybe I'm wrong. And so, I always try to think of myself as a teacher and a learner at the same time. Always. With everyone that I come in contact with. Regardless of their teacher or a learner or whatever.
That's one of the benefits from studying Greek philosophy is when I tell my friends that they're in an institution governed by sophistry, they don't get it, and it's because they didn't study ancient Greek philosophy,
right?
And they don't realize that sophists are people who just tell people what they think.
Yes,
that was what they were known for. And
people like that, though. Unfortunately, that's why religion is so successful as a product.
They like it on an unconscious. Well, okay, maybe they might. I want to assume a better character on a conscious level. I just assume they don't know. Yeah. Maybe they do consciously like that.
Well, yes, I would agree that you're right. It's what I'm saying is probably more a subconscious. I always tell people I think people actually want truth. Most people. They're got lies, but most people, if you ask them and their earnestness, they probably want truth. I don't think they are believing lies willfully, but they, in a sense, they believe their default is to want truth.
Yeah, I think to even clickbait articles, like the ones that like 7 habits for highly successful people, right?
Yeah.
To some extent, the fact that those things work so well almost tells you that some people do kind of want to know something, right?
Oh, right.
At some level, they do want to know some 7 tricks.
But that's hopeful, though, to me. Because then I go, okay. Then instead of feeling like I can't talk to anyone, maybe I just need to be able to talk in a different way. And so that's why I really like your approach to philosophy, because I feel like you're really bright, but you're able to talk in ways that's not just academic. And I think that adds to your quality, not takes away from it.
I used to speak in academic without realizing I did it. And then after I had read a couple of books of like writing, and I realized that writing just because you can write doesn't mean you're a good writer. Yeah. After I finally realized that, then I kind of made a deliberate effort to speak in an ordinary language, because most of the time concepts that academics muddy up with complex language are ordinary concepts. They're not magical, sophisticated. You need to have an IQ of 277 to understand, right? But
then its usefulness is almost not even useful. It's like I said about the car. Here it is, $3 million car. It is not useful to you at all. So that's an idea can be the greatest idea to ever hit the history of the world. But if you don't give it so all of us understand, what use is it? Nothing.
Yeah, the way this Steven Pinker mentions it in his book called The Sense of Style, he says, when I write, the reader should walk away feeling like a genius. The writer should never feel like a genius. Yeah,
that's a good good way to say it. Yeah, I agree.
Because if you can't, the example he gave was like how Brian Greene, he's like a public scientist, a physicist. You've probably seen him. I saw the books. This white guy.
Well, you sure narrowed it down. It's a white guy. A white guy who's an academic. I've never heard of such a thing. You're kidding me.
He explains some of the issues with Einsteinian physics in incredibly ordinary, simple language. So if he can do that, what excuse do you have to say that you can't explain personality in ordinary, simple language?
I totally agree. And to me, just think how many academics really, if you were to tie them up, and all the academics that are really skilled, related to the general population, what would be the percentage? What, 1%? I mean, 2, 5? I mean, even if it was 10 or 20, the majority is not academic. So if you want to really change the world with your ideas, it cannot stay academic to me. Or at least not exclusively.
Even a lot of the time, like a lot of good books are written in very understandable language. Like The Wealth of Nations of Adam Smith is written in understandable language. Alfred Marshall has a book called The Principle of Economics. It's a very understandable book for anybody. Every book Steven Pinker's ever written has become a New York Times bestseller because it's not written in jargony language.
Right.
And the books that I do have that are written in jargony language, sometimes their colleagues won't even read the damn book. Like, there's a famous example where Kant sent out a manuscript of his, or I think he sent out an early copy of his book, Critique of Pure Reason, and one of the people who was supposed to read it sent it back half-read, said, I can't read this anymore. It's just so convoluted that it's torture at this point. And to some extent, reading Kant is torture, because it's like every sentence uses a highly technical word that has a very specific meaning. And sometimes he doesn't necessarily explain it the best. And sometimes you have to jump around the book to see what he was talking about. It's kind of annoying, to be honest. which is why he didn't sell very many books.
Yeah.
So, but you want to sell your books.
well, I want to sell books, but I really want to make a difference in the world. It's really my biggest goal. I want to make an impact, and I really want to do is I want to give, really give philosophy back to the general people, especially my people, atheists. Yeah.
Have you ever seen? Have you ever played the game Deus Ex: Human Revolution?
No.
One of I played that game. I played the original one for the PC when I was like probably 12, and I really liked it. And I played the one for the PS3, and it was really good. I think you would like it. So I'll give you this central premise of the game, which is that basically there's the Illuminati don't want people to have cybernetic revolutions because if they do, they're going to be evolve to a point where they're not controllable, and so the Illuminati is trying to
control them.
They're trying to sever society, and they're trying to make it where it's humans versus cyborgs, or they have special words for them, but I forget.
Sounds like a cool movie.
Yeah, it is. Right? It would be. It's so interesting. It's so fascinating. But in the third one, Mankind, Human Revolution, or Deus Ex, Human Revolution, I think it is. There's this guy who talks about what they want to do is develop these camps for cyborgs to go to, or half human, half man, right? For them to go to, and they can work with each other, and it's like a commune. Well, what it is it's a Stalinist labor camp. but they don't call it a Stalinist labor camp. And so if you would have never, throughout the whole game they talk about it, it's like a meta discussion where it's like,
that's funny.
Oh, I encouraged him to study Stalinist labor camps to understand what's really going on here. Because they're portraying the camp as like this
utopia. Yeah, no, I got it. Well, it's like I said before, to me, the difference between, I feel like in general, people have some sort of a need, animals too, a balance, all life, I think, kind of, is safety and comfort in a sense. And to me, what I mean by that, like, you could have all the comfort in the world, like a drug dealer, can in a sense buy whatever they want, but you're also worried about the government cracking you down and other gangs taking you over and people stealing from you, even in your own, gang or whatever. So you don't really have safety. And they have people that want to kill you or take you over, but you have comfort. So, but safety, is an important thing too. You have to have safety and comfort, kind of a balance, or else you don't really have well-being, to me. Or you can't flourish as good as you possibly could, because you don't have the needed qualities needed for well-being. And since we're social, psychological animals, in a sense, we're very affected by our psychology. So to me, well-being thus becomes not just something that, if you can. No, if you don't have well-being, you'll feel like you're dying as you're alive. It's absolute horrific, depending on how bad it is. So it's more important than actually food, because you could have tons of food and feel terrible. I give you all the food you want, but I'm going to rape you. So, you're not going to die ever, but boy, your well-being will be in the shithole. So
it's interesting to see like how because you tend to be more on the left, so more towards socialism, you would say.
No, well, I'm a socialist, anarchist, mutualist, collectivist. I'm not one thing. So to explain that, because in other words, I'm so anarchist, I don't believe in other anarchists' ideas. Limiting my ideas, put it that way.
Would you say you're against free market capitalism?
I'm against capitalism. I feel that every form of capitalism is toxic, and the fact that the goal is put on the production being monetary, and as soon as you do that, then everything starts getting a value only by its use monetarily. So like, our conversation here I'm not giving you money for this. So in a capitalist setting, why would you even do this? And let's assume that you're feeling, well, I'm going to promote it with my people. So you're still thinking about your benefit. But what I'm really doing this is not because I want to promote you or promote myself. I wanted to talk to you because the quality of who you are, your ability to assess ideas is at a level that I really enjoy. And not just enjoy as art, But I feel like as a science, in a sense, a theoretical form that I'm talking about, when really enlightened people talk about deep ideas, then in a sense we can actually help the ideas move along, I feel. More chance that can happen than if we just sat here and just gave our little, like fixed thinking speeches or something.
I was going to say, it's interesting to see the parallels between some of the things you say and some of the things Adam Smith says, who's a notorious capitalist. But he was also very anti-government, which I think is where...
I'm anti-government in effect. Well, the biggest thing I always tell people, to say I'm anti-government is to look at it from the wrong perspective. I'm pro everyone. I'm pro equality. In other words, I don't think that you should be voting for me, right? That includes no president making decisions for me, no Congress telling me what's a moral law and what's not. We together will figure out, to me, I'm not against laws or governance, but I'm against government structures of hierarchy, distinctly. In other words, if you say to me, Damien, we'll make all your dreams come true, but we have to be a municipal government, where basically it's run almost like, say, the water company. You don't know who works at the water company, do you? But you demand that water is on all the time. And if it's off, I mean even for a few minutes, you will be on the phone raging. Now, can you do that with your government? No, in a sense. You're not listened to. You have no expectation of immediate response. Do you? Absolutely not. In fact, they've even done studies that the Congress only does, I think it's like 3% of what Americans want. Get them out of there. They are not working for us. That is just plain as day. So to me, they're actually then at that point not a benefit. They're an abstraction that's actually removing the future benefit. Because as long as we let them in, and they only give us 3% of what everybody wants, so that means that, how much, right? Almost the whole population of America, in a sense, is not getting what they want. Even like the gun debate, 97% of people, background checks fine, even people in the NRA. But yet somehow we can't pass a law? What the?
The Congress usually deals with... the issue with Congress is that there's unlimited manpower, and so they have to deal with certain, like, very specific issues. And some of the issues they deal with are...
well, granted, I'm not saying that every issue relates directly to people. I'm just saying they don't even try to make it relate to people is what I'm saying. Even if they were 3% accuracy, they're not trying. It's not like 30 or,
I would say Congress doesn't... I don't think the primary concern for Congress is people. I think it's law. I think they're more concerned with...
Right. But the laws, once again... the presupposition of the laws are not for the people. They're for whatever the government decides. And it's not even what the people decide, because if you look at what the people want, like I said, we can't even limit guns in America. We can't even say limit the size of magazines almost. They want to make any size, 150 round magazine for what? Hunting? House protection? Who are you protecting against? The mafia? I mean...
I don't know. My issue with that is I don't know how you would even begin to limit guns, because every time they've tried to, the gun sales have gone up.
But that has a different issue. You're saying that we should never make a rape. That's like saying don't make any rape laws, because rape won't end just because you make a rape law. No, I don't think rape ends because you make rape laws.
Not necessarily. What I'm saying is, from a pragmatic standpoint, I think it would be best to consider other alternatives rather than going after the guns.
Well, first off, to me, guns are a product. They're not a right. You have a right to protection. I agree. You don't have a right to gun. Now, I don't think that means for me personally that there shouldn't be a right to own a gun, because guns are a product. We have a right to own a car in a sense. But the car comes with a driver's license that requires a whole bunch of stuff, including insurance. I have no problem with people owning guns. In fact, I have no problem with machine guns. I'm an anarchist. But that does not mean that you get to own No, but you need to listen. That doesn't mean that I allow you to do whatever you want and infringe on my rights, to infringe on my safety. There's a level of it that the whole environment, all of us, get a say. And to me, if what you're doing is going to affect all of us in a very detrimental way, then you can't do that. Sorry. You don't get 100% rights and get to live with people. And I'm sorry we can't get outside of living with people.
Well, here would be an interesting, because like I don't have a particular stance on this issue because I haven't researched it.
Yeah.
But I know there are some good arguments on both sides. How would you go by the argument? There was a study published that found. So I think the average, or the number of deaths per year by gun, 6,000 go to suicide by handgun, I think, and then I think about 500 go to assault rifles. How would you then counter the argument that there was a study that it was done by Obama's people too, that about 500,000 to 3 million defense uses of firearms occur each year? Because then you have
there's a higher percentage of people that shoot themselves or their loved ones or their children shoot themselves or loved ones with guns than ever do any protecting. It's way out of proportion.
Well, what they were saying was that.
So if that's what you're starting, first off, what's a gun, right? Like I said, it's a product. We need to, because I know in America, especially all my people in America, you have this opinion that the Constitution has said you have a right. It says you have a right to possess. It's not saying that there's an inherent, like, somehow if I looked in your DNA, there's an inherent property of right for gun. There's not. Get that out of your head. That's not even what the Constitution said. But I feel like that's some of the American, patriot, people feel that they're super nationalists and all that. They have this feeling that guns somehow are like some inalienable right. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, that's the pragmatic issue I was talking about. Is like how if Obama couldn't get those guns away from people, I don't know how anybody else will. And he had millions of dollars.
Well, yeah, but so I don't want to get guns away from people. Let me explain this to you. See, I think that there should, number one, be 3 levels of licensing for a firearm. I think there should be ones that are basically long rifles that could only be used for hunting. That should be one class, like class 1. Class 2, pistols or anything that's small and can be concealed. Class 3, anything that's automatic or whatever. And that's the only classes you're allowed to have. So I don't have a problem even with automatic weapons. But to me, automatic weapons cannot be owned in a domicile that is connected to other domiciles. Because you can't have bullets shooting through walls, because those will go through a wall in a heartbeat. Just like I don't think a 50 Magnum should be held in an apartment house either, because that thing will blow through the walls too, like a cannon, and kill children. No, I'm sorry. Your rights have to be limited to by how much it infringes on everyone else's rights. So yes, should they have?
That sounds like you're pro-government.
No, I'm pro. No. First off, anarchy is no rulers, not no rules.
That's the way of putting it.
Well, that's the correct Greek thing, anyways. And so, anyways, this other thing too is that I'm not saying there's only one kind of anarchist or one kind of belief about how guns should be controlled. I'm just reminding people of the ontological reality. Number one, guns are a product. Period. No person has an inalienable right to a product in that kind of a sense. Now, because it's not like it's water, like it's needed for life. You don't need guns. Like if you don't have guns right now, you're not going to die soon. Or have some sort of a, mental breakdown if you do not possess guns. Now, I'm not saying guns don't give people a feeling of safety and comfort, but as I told you, like I said, that also removes half the safety and comfort of your family and everybody around you, so it matters.
What about the argument I mentioned earlier, that there's about 500,000 to 3 million defensive uses of firearms each year, which outweighs the number of deaths by a lot.
And you feel, so let's just assume that all of them were one-sided. That actually doesn't make them not dangerous. So
it makes them protective.
No, it doesn't. It is simply a product. That's like saying the fact that a car has a bumper, now that's a safe car. No. That car, when it crashes, will have less harm to the person. But its protective value, is it 100%? So what things is a seatbelt 100%? Do we, I'm just saying, should we have people wear helmets while in the car with neck braces to make sure they don't get whiplash?
So would your argument then be, since it's dangerous, we should therefore get rid of it?
No, I think if it's dangerous in the environment, it always should look at the environment. We should always be regulated as it's a whole impact. It's individual impact, it's societal impact, and we have to make judgments on all the values available, not just, how it affects me individually. See, because the problem is they move it to rights. Rights is an individual thing that's then acknowledged by society. But it's not. It's the other way around. It's a product. It's a societal environment issue because it's a societal environment product. It's not innate to just Jordan or just Damien. So, but you're right. It's like Jordan's right in the sense to go for philosophy and say not, interpretive dance. The fact that you have a right to choose between those two, that's your right. Your right to, bring a loaded firearm, you say, to your dance, or your philosophy or something. That's not your right. Any more than it is for you to put a bomb in your thing and say, I'm bringing a bomb for safety. Because when I have a bomb in my bag, nobody bullies me. I mean, that might be true that if you told people you have a bomb in your bag, no one will bully you. I don't know.
Would you say there's a right to protection?
Well, true, there's a right to protection, and that's why I think that we should be paying in a sense, a private workforce to be our military and our police force. But they're ones owned by the people, for the people, and are never against the people because they're the ones that pay them. They're the ones that make, in a sense, so you talk about laws. What I want is that we have our laws, and all laws have to be reasonable, justified, have to be, beneficial for the environment. I don't think that we should limit the person because I don't think that a group is ever lacking the person. So we need to see both truths. Every group is a group of individuals, but every group operates almost like an individual in a sense. If you look at it in a global sense, then every individual, though, still has individual needs that are important. It's hard because it's not black or white to me.
Yeah, it's just like, how do you weigh the societal benefit versus the individual benefit?
Well, you have to look at all the axiology involved. You have to look about what does it do to people. I think that this is the issue. We should grant as many rights as possible to all citizens, period. Many rights as possible.
That could be a lot of rights. That could be like
it is a lot of rights. I think all drugs should be legal tomorrow. Anybody above 18, anyone that cognitively is somewhat, a reasoning adult, legal tomorrow. Period. And then what we should be doing is making laws on behavior. If you misuse drugs, then this is the consequences. If you misuse guns, here's a consequence. If you misuse things. So to me, we should be making laws, I feel, on justified behavioral outcomes that people are doing.
Who determines misuse?
Who determines misuse? Well, we figure out, like I said, the axiology involved. And we have a conversation for all of us. We all decide.
Because if you allow, say, one central power to determine misuse.
Oh, we don't allow. That would be not anarchism. One central.
Well, then you would need some kind of law.
Social
laws.
Well, yeah, you have laws. The group of people, we have direct democracy. Everyone in the entire country, like we vote on politicians, but instead we'll vote on a law. Here's a law that Jordan wants to make it that, it's okay, let's say, for teachers to have guns. We're all going to vote on that, Jordan. The whole society, all of Canada, all of America. We all, open election, we all get to vote. And I think that there should be no political anything. Because to me, it shouldn't be about political parties. Because the problem is, I think like that. That's I say even the anarchists, why I don't totally fix myself into any of their thinking. Because I feel it's the same issue. I want the ideas that are true. And I feel too eclectic. That idea is good. Oh, that idea is good. Well, no, not that one. Oh, that one. Oh, get that away from me. So some of them are like super good, and other ones like I can't even begin to agree with. So.
Well, the way I always approach politics is that I've never been someone. I'm skeptical about political philosophy, and so I'm skeptical about adopting positions. I tend to. Maybe this is my bias from studying economics, but I go with who has the best model and who can make predictions that are going to be accurate. That we can agree. So, I think there are some things we can agree about, like.
Obviously, we've had a pretty long conversation,
not just between me and you, but like in general. I think that it's like the Sam Harris position, where it's like some things we can agree about that are just really bad. So, like.
I'll agree. Some things that Sam Harris
acid on someone's face is genuinely really bad, right? And so if we can have a policy that mitigates the amount of acid being thrown on people's faces, then I'll go with that policy because that policy if it can be proven to work through scientific reasoning, then yes, I'll choose that policy. However, will I choose the political philosophy that's associated with that policy? Say, I tend to not pay attention to the philosophy sides of it, because I know the philosophy sides of it can almost lead you off into the wrong direction, I would say. So, for example,
but you're not saying that thinking in a philosophy way leads you off into a wrong direction, are you? Because I would say I feel like that's the exact opposite. If you use philosophy in a correct way, you should be leading yourself closer to the truth, I would hope.
I'm talking specifically about political philosophy, which I think is an expression of values for how people should be interacting with one another.
Yes.
Which is slightly different from moral philosophy. But so, let me give you an example. I really like the argument from anarcho-capitalists that goes as follows.
You're talking about archo-capitalists, right? Not anarcho-capitalists?
Anarcho-capitalists.
Oh, because there's archo, and there's ones that believe, in a sense, it's like the in-between the right and the left, sort of. It's like in the middle position. Where basically you... hold on a second. My wife is calling. Hey, babe, I'm in a thing. I'll talk to you later. This is emergency, is it? Is it emergency? Okay, love you. Bye. Sorry. So there's one that's basically where it believes that you should almost have black markets. It believes that black market as a form of government, almost in a sense. It's hard to explain, but like everybody interacting, so it's almost like a form of capitalism, but they feel like everybody should work together, so it's kind of like socialist capitalist. It's a weird thing, but I thought that's what you were saying, but go ahead.
Yes, so there's an argument from anarcho-capitalists that goes something like the following. It's the centralization of force is fundamentally immoral, because it's like robbing people. So if you reject to pay taxes, then the cops will show up to arrest you. If you reject your arrest, then you'll get shot. And so governments are fundamentally centralized force agents that don't respond to moral arguments. They just use force. You don't agree with them, then, right? I always found that to be a good argument. And then even furthermore, I researched this. I could be wrong, but in order to not be a citizen of a government, because then people say, well, then just don't be a citizen of a government, right?
Yeah, well, that's also like don't be a capitalist. I'm in a system that is capitalist, so there's no. If you were to. But
let
me go to the first point that you said. So the first point you said to me, the problem with that is no one owns land. That's a real anarchist. They realize the entire earth, there's no lines. That's all illusion. It's all fantasy that humans have invented. It's all abstraction. There is no such thing as America. There's no such thing as Canada. There is continents of Americas, which Canada is part of, and then America will be touching in a sense also. So to me, it's understanding that place as an anarchist, the reality of the world. So all land is force. All property that involves minerals of land is often also force. So I feel like that it's a disingenuous thing that the anarcho-capitalists do, because they go, oh yeah, anarcho-socialists are right, no force. But then they go and say, I believe in all this property stuff. I believe I can own land. I believe that my forefathers who stole land, now you need to accept that that's now my land legitimately.
I think there's a conceptual distinction that can be made between physically, like the literal idea of owning something and the metaphorical idea of owning something inside of a social system.
Well, I'm not saying that we can't. I'm not against property 100%. What I'm saying is, it's that the denial that property, all of it, is by force. That's what I'm saying. The anarcho-capitalist says the government is force, tax is force. And I go, well, actually, all property involves force. You don't own your house. You don't own that land. You were told you could. But that was actually a dishonesty in a reality sense. You don't own that land. You can possess that land through the thing of someone else, basically through coercive force, like, say, the American government, deciding that what America is and is not, where our borders are not. Wars have always been fought to decide who can have the force and ownership of the land. But the fact that they want to build walls and the fact that we keep things out really is, or we say only should have medical for Americans or only for Canadians, or that whole mentality. Although you could do it,
I think you would have some issues with respect to the debate. Like, so the human body does need to consume resources in order to exist.
Yeah.
And so
does an animal's body. Tell me how a human is different.
Well, I'm going to get to that. Yeah. So at some point, we're all going to need to compete with each other for resources, right? Mm-hmm. And so what a capitalist is saying is, instead of brutally murdering each other for these resources, we should just come up with social agreements or social contracts and say that he owns that land, socially, not literally, but like in the social metaphorical sense, he owns the land. Because otherwise, you're going to have sheer violence. And that has happened, and that's where we came from. Right?
And like I said, so I feel that we own the land communally. I am a socialist anarchist. I believe that much as the animals own the land, we have a right for space. I believe that we have the right. But what I'm saying is that because I realize no one, in a sense, has a right to, say, a diamond mine. You have no right to an African diamond mine, right? But yes, you do. In a capitalist society, you could own them, even though the land is actually the Africans, which was never bought from them, or certainly not in any kind of a legitimately justified way, but always in a more swindle or just power control way.
Well, that's so people who do, when the war takes the land, generally that's what happens, and that's why I tend to be more towards business types of people where they don't do physical violence, because that's actually less advantageous inside of a society. Physical violence isn't advantageous inside of society, evident by the fact that most violent criminals don't make a lot of money. The people who do make a lot of money are the people who make business agreements. So the advantageous strategy is twofold, where it's like you make more money inside of a social society or a social system, and you don't have to kill other people's children.
Well, why I do? Well, to me, anarcho-capitalism only came out in the 1950s. Anarchism started in the 1850s. And so for 100 years, all anarchism was socialism. There was no such thing as a non-socialist anarchism. Now, I will agree, even now today, even on the socialist anarchist side, there's starting to be some wars with the millennials that are anarchists that don't think that socialism is any good. They want to do post-socialist anarchists, where it's not capitalist nor is it socialist. I don't know. I'm open to their ideas too. I mean, if they have some cool stuff, maybe, I should learn from them.
The other thing too is, so this is going back to my original point about how philosophy can mislead you sometimes. If you look at policy implementation inside of economics, and you look at the consequences of some of the policies, some of them tend to be more towards, say, market regulation, which is more socialist, versus free market. And efficiency is always higher with free market. So independent of your political belief.
Right, right. But that's assuming for who? Is it so? In other words,
for both parties.
For only the top. See, it's to me, you think capitalism, you always have to remember all the presuppositions down to the base person who's being robbed of their livelihood, of their life, of their well-being at every stage because of extreme poverty. The people on the top of capitalism, the 1%, benefit without working. For all, in a sense, they use, mental work. They have all these little minions all working in a sense and sending all the profit up. So to me, yes, capitalism works. Wonderful. Absolutely fabulous for the 1%. It's I'm saying
from a societal level, just say, for example, if you wanted to buy a book, then you would get the most, you would have the greatest benefit if you were in a free market equilibrium position. So if you were, say we had a more socialist, simply just this one book market, and you wanted to buy
that because you've looked at the production of ideas out of a socialist market and ideas out of a capitalist market. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. This is just mathematical modeling of books. So this is why I make the distinction between science and political philosophy. Is economists don't care about political philosophy; they care about mathematical models of products, and they look at who wins on each side of the game. Right,
but once again, I'm saying, but when you say who wins in capitalism, there's always a 1% that wins, always,
well,
and there's always a large. I know, but you're saying a book is a product, and you're saying the product's benefit. Once you say benefit, you're referring to its benefit outside of the book itself.
No, right? I'm talking about who on each. So there's something called the market equilibrium, where each side maximally benefits. And we can mathematically prove that.
I'm not doubting math. What I said was, I am saying that has to be put in the context of what it's doing. In other words, I could say that really the best society was Hitler, because really he had the maximization, even in the most psychologically harmful environment, war, he seemed to be able to maximize the people under him and to come up with some of the most original ideas the world's ever known.
That's a level of analysis above what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about right now is just a market for books, not even a society-wide thing. Just a market for books.
Well, I always think about how it relates to large society, but go ahead.
Well, when you get into more macroeconomics, things get more harder to discuss. And I almost think macroeconomics is less scientific than microeconomics because it's so much more complex. But
you know that science is philosophy. Science is pragmatic. There's no such thing as an absolute science. So I know, I'm just wanting to clarify for everybody, when you say this, you're saying science has axioms that have tended to work and thus have tended to gain a level of what we perceive as an accuracy because it seems to be as useful as possible. But I have never lost the sight of that. Spider is not flying in the wind. It actually has a presupposition only built on pragmatic philosophy. But go ahead.
For me, science is different from the philosophy and science both use observation, but science is about prediction and philosophy is about categorization. That's the distinction I always make, because philosophy doesn't necessarily care about making accurate predictions, insofar as science cares about making accurate predictions.
So, but accuracy, what do you mean by that? Because accuracy is the level of assurance of truth, I would say. So the amount that we know something is true is how accurate it is. If I told you something is 30% true, you know its accuracy is low. If I say it has 100% truth, by default, its accuracy would have to have been the same as I'm wrong.
In science, when you make a prediction, it has to be able to be wrong. In philosophy, when you say something's a chair, that can't be wrong. it's you develop the category of chairness, and if it doesn't fit that category, it doesn't fit that category. If it does fit that category, it does fit that category.
Well, but science does that too. The fact that science says there's atoms, or it said that before, then in a sense there was even proof of that. Now that
Well, the theory of atoms is philosophy.
Yes, I understand.
But the scientific part of atoms would be making predictions about gaining accurate knowledge about some physical object.
But I'm just saying, science, I know that you're not saying this because I understand you, but you're not saying that science is somehow removed from philosophy and a separate thing.
No.
Okay.
No. But I'm not saying they're wholly separate. I'm saying there is key to... It's almost like we have identical twins. They're kind of like 80% similar.
Okay, that's fine.
So there's a slight distinction in how.
Well, there is a distinction. I'm not trying to imply that there's not a distinction. I'm just saying I don't like when people act like they're talking about two separate things that have nothing to do with each other and they're not in any way connected. I just want to make clear because some atheists, I'm with a lot of Facebook atheists, and a lot of them seem to profess an idea that somehow these things are separate. And it's like, they go, well, I believe science. I'm like, okay, yeah, you believe philosophy too, then great. Because
you have to, philosophy to me is like the semantics, whereas science is like the syntax. But to go back to what I was saying was like, when it comes to policy and how things play out, you can adopt more socialist or more capitalist policies, but there's always a consequence that's measurable with respect to how efficient something was.
True.
In terms of economics.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to like micro products, usually for instance, if let's say you push a tax onto a product, say cigarettes, and that tax is say $10. Well, what a company can do now is the government assumes that the tax will be split between the consumer and the producer. So the producer will raise the price a little bit, and the consumer will pay a little bit more, right? It will cover the tax. However, what the companies can do is, if they have a product that's very inelastic, which means people are always going to buy it, so like gasoline is always going to be bought, it's inelastic. So if you raise the price, people aren't going to buy less of it. People are going to buy the same amount.
Well, they may buy less of it because, I mean, you see when they raise the prices, people travel less. I mean, but well, I know what you're saying in general.
Yeah. Whereas if someone raised the price of a slushie of say $2 or $3, it would probably drop a lot. How much is being sold.
Slushie sounds really damn good, actually, but.
And so, if you have an inelastic product, the company can jack up the price really high, and so the consumer pays all the tax. Mm-hmm. And so in that situation, the socialist policy actually helps the corporation. And we can mathematically prove that.
Well, but I don't think this, in general, just so people understand, socialism, to me, is that workers own the means of production. So it will always be pro-business, and to me, in that sense, it is as long as it's really about who owns the business. If you mean the people own it, then...
That's the point I was going to, is like... Yeah. Sometimes the political philosophy needs to be informed by economic science, and you almost have to separate your political stance.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine with that. I think that's reasonable. I don't think that part is reasonable. I'm just saying that when we make the assumptions about things that we need to be careful with. But as needing science, that's why I love axiology, because I mean I don't do formal axiology, which is the social science of axiology. Because it uses calculus, and if you can't do calculus, you cannot do it. Well, I can't do calculus, so I cannot do it. I see that and I go, it kind of makes sense what you're doing, but I don't. That's not how I think the things out. But I mean, like you said, it is important that people do that, not just the theorizing, but break down the science. Because there's a guy that died, Leland Pelham, and he wrote a psychology book about axiology, where he actually went out and did science. He went to 8 different countries and studied, do they think axiologically different or the same? In other words, do we have some sort of a universal inherited or biological tendency towards thinking one axiological way or the other?
And probably slightly variation.
Yeah, there's a slight variation, but there is a somewhat similar thing. And he said that in his book, he said that morality is too important to be left in the hands of religion, or even just in the hands of philosophy. I thought it was
he must have wrote it near the end of his career.
You're like, and so he got killed in a car accident? Are you sure it was an accident? Like, wow, that was. Yeah, I'm sure.
Most people can't say that nowadays.
I remember, you know what's so crazy is he's a Christian, but he likes axiology so much that he realized it's actually, and scientifically especially, it's better than his religion. And so he says, I guess I got to use this, which I thought, what an honest thinker. To actually go in there with a fixed mindset, but be so willing to be malleable to what you see as the truth that you would just change. I mean, that's what I hope that I do too. That if I see truth that clearly, then I should change.
It's kind of because Richard Dawkins talks about one of these physicists at Oxford, or an astronomer, I think, astronomist, and he says he compartmentalizes private beliefs with what he teaches. So he teaches that the universe is millions of years old, but he believes personally that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. In which I specifically remember watching this video where it was him and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Richard Dawkins said that he should straight up be fired.
Yeah, that's funny. I think talk to you. I don't know about fire, but yeah, I can see why. I mean, I'm glad he's teaching in a sense what I think is the truth or what the evidence seems to demonstrate. Certainly not magic is their answer.
It's kind of weird. I think though, to add context to what Dawkins is saying is that what kind of researcher would this guy be if he doesn't believe what he's actually, right? He's not like that kind of 120% into it as a study kind of geek person, right? And so, at least my perception of Oxford is like it's the top-notch researchers and professors.
I would think that, yeah.
And so, to some extent, I think I actually talking about the case in that extent, where it's like the guy's not really that into his evidence, and so he's not going to really develop Nobel Prize-winning hypotheses. But however, do you really want to fire someone for personal belief?
Do I? No.
Right. So that's a line you don't really want to cross.
No, once again, I say as an anarchist, there's no way I'd do that. People own themselves. That means their beliefs. That's why I also don't try to attack people. Like if you say right now, I believe in Jesus and all this, and I would go, okay. I mean, unless you tell me that you need to believe this, then I'm going to say, yeah, no, why do you think that? And now we're going to have a debate. But just you stating, like, I have people that are religious friends, and as long as they don't say anything on my thing, I don't ever go on their say anything, because I feel like they have the right to think that they want. It doesn't bother me. You're forcing children, or you're making me, or you're telling me that I have to agree to this. Yeah, I have a problem with that.
I would agree with that, but to some extent, I would have it's like I do have friends who are religious, but I always confront them because I feel like I shouldn't compartmentalize my beliefs to avoid the debate. And then there's also the question of like, well, how long are you going to debate these people for, right?
I've debated many. I'm not saying I never debate. I'm just saying that I don't start with that. If you just say, I believe, like you said, I believe in football, I would not say anything. I don't like football. If you said, the greatest team is the Cowboys, hands down, period, I would go, yeah, whatever. I don't even care about football, so okay. So that's what you... Now, if you say, Damien, you have to agree. Now we have a problem. Now I'm going to have to debate you. Now, I openly say to people, I say, I'm a firebrand atheist. Or I generally sometimes say I'm a caring firebrand atheist. That generally makes them want to ask, well, what the hell does that mean? Or I say I'm an axiological atheist, but they don't understand what that means either. And if I say, well, I'm kind of like a caring anti-theist atheist, they still wouldn't understand. What? So, yeah, whatever. I try to live by my behavior being value-centered. So.
Well, yeah, that's I would say I'm a free speech absolutist, and so I would probably, so for example, if I had a really religious friend, they would probably have beliefs that are just incompatible with mine, especially about, say, if they were from particular religions that had negative views about females. And so there would be constant disagreement between me and this person, and I wouldn't be able to call them a friend anymore to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because there would just be such a disagreement, right? And I feel like I shouldn't censor my beliefs just for the sake of a friendship.
Well, yeah, I think it depends what your beliefs are. Now, if you say, because once again, my value judgment about is how unuseful your belief is. So if you say, my belief is that it's cool to rape babies, I'm done with you. I won't even talk. I would almost just end it right now. I have nothing else to say. You've just informed me of all I need to know. There's other things. If you said, well, I think that babies should never wear blue or pink, I will debate you on that if you want, because that's not but then if we can't see eye to eye, I'm fine with you thinking whatever that doesn't mean. He doesn't.
Yeah, that's another controversial belief, whether babies should wear pink or blue. But for example, if I had a friend who believed in the concept of white systemic male privilege, which I've heard 15 different people explain it to me. I think I finally understood it after 6 years. Well, that would be something I would challenge. And that belief is going to influence how they view me, I think that's almost a strong enough belief for me. If I can't persuade them out of their position after, say, 2 months, right? Just on-off debate every couple of days or whatever, or weeks. If I couldn't persuade them out of their position, since that's a worldview influencing belief, I think we would have to discontinue.
Yes, and I agree. As axiologist, what I'm saying, I value judge what it is you're presenting. How, if it's too, disvalued to the world or to me and others, I'm going to have to. Like I said, and depending on how bad it is, how extreme, then I wouldn't even waste I would just immediately block you. That's I wouldn't even. That's like this one time I had this person that I had done a video with, and someone called and told, or not called, but they sent a message to me and said this person is actually a sexual offender. I'm like, what? I did not hear that. So I took their name. I did a web search, and I find out they have a crime for basically almost sexual delivery to a minor or whatever. That maybe the minor was almost like statutory rape. That the minor was willing, but or
see,
something.
with those issues too, it's like since I'm such an open-minded person, I would want to ask and actually see the case and how it unfolded.
Right. Yeah, but it wasn't what they were trying to say is like that the person had been raped. But then I looked at the actual thing they got charged with, and I'm like, nah, that's not really what it says. But I felt so uncomfortable having them as a video that people might not know the difference. I was like, yeah, I got to take that down. Not because I 100% am saying that I know everything about it. I don't. I just know that I don't need that controversy. I was like, yeah, I don't.
And in respect, that's something they should have told you beforehand.
That's what I felt. Like, wow, you never said that. So it was quite a shocker when this chick's like, you support rapists? And I'm like, what the hell? No, I do not. Well, then what are you doing this? I'm like, that's not a rapist. And they're like, yeah. So, yeah, right, yeah.
And that doesn't make them look any better. Because like, if I were in that situation where I was like falsely charged, I would tell people and I would make the argument and have clarifications put out there, and then they can decide from that. But to not tell somebody seems a little bit of a Machiavellian in a sense, where it's like they know that it was the case.
It's possible. Yeah. Well, and I did. Like I said, I didn't ever say that I know, and I still don't. I don't know exactly the whole thing, so I don't. All I know is I can't have people contacting me and saying that I'm supporting rapists. Yeah, and then I don't know from that person. I go look and they have some kind of a charge. Yeah, no.
Yeah, because
you got convicted. You're on probation, so somebody decided in a court of law that you did do something.
Yeah, and not to mention, like, you have a public image to maintain, right?
Yes, I do.
And so, it's almost disingenuous on their behalf to not mention it. And that gets to the point where it's like, how would you even, if that person hadn't said anything, right? How much more damage would have been done? It wasn't for that one person who would just, and even for them to like flat out accuse you of like, hopefully that person didn't say anything too harsh about you associating with someone who's.
I don't know. All I know is I was like, oh, I don't even want to be dealt with this. This is not. Like, whoa, I try to respect people and support people. I'm like, how? No. Yeah, I felt personally like, wow, I mean, I'm not expecting that everyone has beautiful backgrounds and everything they've done is shoot rainbows out of their ass. I mean, but there's some things that, I don't. Like if someone said, well, I was kind of racist, so I bombed this one church. Unless you've totally changed, and now hate that, I probably, nah, I don't respect that. Even if you're an atheist or an anti-theist or an anti-religionist, I don't support that.
That's one of the reasons why I never liked Aristotelian ethics, is because Aristotelian ethics assumes that they didn't know any better and that it's your duty to show them they're wrong. It's like, no, I don't think I want that duty. I'm just gonna say that they're wrong.
Yeah, I do feel I do have a duty to try to help people understand they're wrong, but I wouldn't say it is a duty to tell people they're wrong.
And even like to some extent, Aristotelian ethics, it's almost like you hold the labels good and evil, and you can't attribute evil until you're sure that person is aware that what they're doing is evil. It's like, well then, it's kind of like evil doesn't really exist until you declare it exists.
Correct, which is not reasonable.
Yeah, I never liked that position.
Well, I do think that, in a sense, evil is a construct, or good, or whatever, is a construct of use in our minds. I mean, as axiologists, I do think that that all morality is human based, or our awareness of it, put it that way. Because in a sense, I think animals act in moral ways, but they're not always as cognitive about it. So it's probably not cognitive morality, it's more like behavioral morality, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what we're calling morals is just this pattern of behavior.
Correct, yes, exactly.
So there's, to that extent, I do agree that morality is just a label, but being able to label something evil and good without having gray areas in between, which Aristotelian ethics kind of introduces this gray areas of, well, did he really know he was evil? Do we really know that?
Which I do think that when you say that, those are good things to know. Do they know? Because I think that we have to look at the level of knowledge. In other words, I think morality, is judged somewhat on the availability to cognitive ability. So do you know? Does a person at 3 years old understand or know, as you said, do you know, what morality is? Well, I mean, there's studies that show they have a very basic at 3 months. But it's not what we would call morality. It's more like moral leanings or something. They
can distinguish between good helpers, harmers.
There you go. That's about it. We'll stop right there. That's done. And then that's kind of all they do is just sort of from that standpoint. But they don't know. So I do think that understanding what they know is beneficial. I don't think that, like you're saying, I don't think that's a blanket universal excuse. We go, well, of course they didn't know. Come on. Most people know. Unless there's some kind of a real problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's the importance of intent that you need to understand. That's very well, because that influences sentencing, right?
Yes, it does. I think it should, in a sense, be different depending on what the things are, yeah.
And I always wanted to formally study law, and I've never formally studied it. I wanted to actually take the LSAT just to say I took it. And apparently philosophy students do really good at it.
Yeah, well, that's cool. After talking to you, I decided I was thinking I need to get more into philosophy of law. Because it made me realize, talking to someone else who's like a polymath, it made me realize, man, I want to know even more stuff. So I thought, what is the hardest law, or no, the hard law? I said, what is the hardest philosophies that can possibly be done by anyone? I want to check all those out.
You would probably like some of the democratic journals. There's journals of democracy that get published every year, and you can subscribe to them for $80 or whatever. And some of the opinions that are in those books, you would find really, really interesting, because it's not just one political stance. It's
that's cool.
The people that you talk about, the 1%ers, they write journals in these books.
Right, yeah.
There's a guy who wrote, he's a billionaire. He's in the top 1%, and he wrote an article in there that he talks about how we need to manifest a culture of desire inside the West in order to stimulate the economy. Basically, he wants to brainwash people to be hedonistic.
Well, I have no problem with that, because I think we start hedonistic in a sense. I see that our thing, like I told you, is a balance in a sense of safety and comfort. And we would love a lot of comfort, but we also need a lot of safety. So to me,
well, he's not even for the safety and comfort. He's just straight up materialism.
But materialism is comfort and safety. In other words, if you have a big bank account, what's the difference between you and your own poverty? Safety and comfort. You have both comfort, and your money and the ability of future wealth, or at least the sustainment of wealth, is safety and comfort. I'm just saying how I see it. He
could care less if the product was safe or not. He's not in it for the safety and comfort.
Well, yeah,
he's in it just because he wants people to consume. That's the only
but all I was saying is hedonism, if it's done in a universal way, would care about all the aspects of life.
Sure.
To me, it's not a. In other words, I always feel like it's presented as such a superficial philosophy, when actually hedonism can be very theoretical or in depth or normative or whatever. To me,
yeah, hedonism stems from Bentham's work and other really smart philosophers. They talk about hedons. Bentham actually wanted to come up with ways to measure points of pleasure, and assign it a value, so we can actually make it mathematical.
I like that idea. That does. I would say that. Yeah, some of it. That would be great if we could.
we will be able to do that maybe in the year 3000. Because what you can do is measure brain responses to stimulus.
That would be very good.
And economists are actually talking about this right now. It's called neuroeconomics. They want to take the theory of marginal utility and combine it with neuroscience. And it's a very interesting, it's philosophical at this point. We don't have the technology to do that.
Well, I think it'd be good knowledge. Depending on how we use it is different. But I mean, I think that absolutely, I want to know as many true things as possible, man. I want to know.
Have you ever played Metal Gear Solid?
I don't play games.
You're missing out on some good story games.
Well, I'm just telling you, I don't. I like thinking. Just me. I'm not saying you can't think. Once again, I don't. When I say things my own self, I don't try to put everybody down and in some kind of vast swath. I'm not trying to be bigoted. I'm just saying, for me personally, it feels like games are too just repetitive. And that's not thinking. For me personally, they're like, you just do this little thing and then you accomplish that, and then you just do this little thing and accomplish that. But why do you accomplish those things? Well, because then you win. That's the goal, is just winning. I don't know. But I'm not saying it's bad. It's entertainment. But I'm just saying, for me, I never really got that. It seems like, because like a game is real hard and you play it, and then like, what's the game? Finally getting it hard is then you beat it. I'm like,
well, the games I mainly concern myself with are story-oriented games, because there's a lot of good writers in the. You
mean like Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff you're talking about?
No, not necessarily that. Like digital console or PC-based games that are like maybe adventure, maybe investigation type stuff. But like Metal Gear, for example, there's. It reminded me of this one game about Raiden, one of the characters. And in it, what they did is they found a way to pull out brains from bodies and put them in virtual simulators. And they could actually stimulate the reward centers of the brain whenever these virtual simulators killed a person, for example.
That, which, who knows, may happen in our future.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, that's why you might like some of these stories.
Oh, I like the ideas. I was just saying that. Oh, I love thinking, dude. Theoretical thinking is my favorite. But doing repetitive things, like I don't really like reading books that much. Seriously, I just don't. I do as little as possible because I don't like it. I like thinking. Like you and me talking and us thinking, that's like awesome to me. Having to focus on just one kind of thing and it.
There's a type of thinking actually that you do get, that you can't really get it. Maybe you can get it from a debate, but there's a type of thinking involved in video games, at least real-time, like first-person shooters, for example, that you can't get anywhere else. And it's the thinking on your feet type deal, where it's like you have to be calculating strategies for each move you make.
Which is what we're doing in this talk that we've been doing. We've been navigating the architecture with each other, to me.
It's phenomenologically speaking, it's not necessarily the same, because it's
well, true, yeah, phenomenologically it would be different.
The consequence of me making a mistake right now are not as nearly as high if I were to, say, reload my gun at the wrong second.
Well, but it depends on what you mean by that. Do you mean extrinsically or systemically? Because extrinsically in your little game, but systemically for your life, its value is actually probably low. But this conversation may be extrinsically, low to you. But systemically, I know both of us, I talking the first time with you that actually sadly didn't get recorded. But, I mean, I felt like I had really, thought a lot more. It felt good. It's almost like I've been eating popcorn too much. And then someone goes, well, here's a steak with vegetables. You're like, damn, steaks are good. The hell is eating so much popcorn for?
And yeah, there's, I would agree with that statement or that analysis. But from a purely from a point of view, from being purely interested in different types of experiences,
right? Yeah,
I think you can get it with even sports. It's a type of thought where, if you mess up, say, on the 5-second marker out of this 10-second operation, the whole thing goes out the window. Right, it's that kind of high-pressure situation that video games can present to you.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying that. Well, once again, see, I think that you get a lot from everything you do, probably anything you do. Because, once again, I think it's you that's doing it. It's different. Like me. People, how many people have thought about morality? I think about morality, and I come up with all kinds of things that some people haven't ever thought about, or at least in the way that I present it. I think about philosophy in ways that people don't present it. I mean, it's not saying like I'm some perfect person. I'm not. I'm just a thinker. I'm just saying I'm a thinker. Everybody else like gets an idea and goes, okay, great, and run with it. And I go, yeah, why? Why am I running with it? What happens if I do run it? What happens if I don't run with it? What are this thing we're talking about? What are its parts? How can we utilize its parts? Are we actually utilizing it 100%? Let's just say philosophy is the greatest thing in the world. Are we utilizing it as much as we should? As it applied to as many beneficial things as possible? And the answer is no. Philosophy is not being utilized like it should, and it is not being benefited as much as it could. And I think that some of the reason is because people try so much to be just, specialists and not enough like I believe you and me are doing, which is be thinkers. Not just to toot our own horns, but I'm saying I think it's not that people that focus on one specific thing could be great. I mean, like doctors. A doctor that just does say one type of an ailment or something could be a great doctor, just that it's doing only that limited thing.
Well, it's just that's what Adam Smith talks about in the division of labor, where he says to some extent the division of labor to increase our efficiency actually is necessary, because what you said is someone specializes at being a doctor, they're going to be the best at curing that. Whereas if that doctor had to do 15 other things, he would suck at it, right?
Right.
And sometimes there are problems that we need someone to specialize at and spend like 40 years of their life working on that.
And wouldn't it be great if we didn't have capitalism, where someone like you can just focus on school or thinking and learning, like me too? I was a truck driver for like 11 years. What a waste. Never thought about thinking at all. I'm not saying that it wasn't beneficial, but it certainly helped my life, from money. But I'm saying is that, but it wasn't beneficial in the fact that one act really wasn't going to change the world. I feel like I have a lot, just like you. I feel like I have a lot to offer, and for me to have never told anybody my ideas and just stayed a truck driver and died a truck driver, that would have been a waste to me.
Yeah, so there's also even Adam Smith talks about how the philosopher is basically a generalist by default, where what they do is not to specialize in any particular area, but to go and look at ideas in a bunch of different areas, right? And so there are some positions that are like kind of reflective generalist positions in a society, whereas there are positions that are incredibly specialized and need specialization. And I think some things you do want specialized.
Definitely. I think that we should try to utilize all the skills people have to as much as we can maximize that potential, because then we all benefit in a sense. If you do better philosophy than me, great, go do that, and then you can help all of us, hopefully. You know what I'm saying? That's why I think that, if someone else does science better, I don't do science good. They need to go do that. I'm not good at everything. When it comes to theoretical thinking, reasoning, I'm pretty good. But it comes to like science stuff, like one person goes, "You're good at science." I'm like, I know some archaeology. That's not the same as really saying I'm good at science. I would never try to take a debate on evolution. I would not do it, because I would not do a very good job.
It's not that hard to defend, because the alternative.
Well, yeah, I know it's not that hard to defend, because I was just saying is I wouldn't want to. Well, I would be willing to take the debate. I would just never want to say I was an expert in it or even good at it. I'm like, well, I'm going to do it because actually I don't even need to be good to go against your reasoned argument. But as far as I would not try to act in any kind of way like that I'm proficient in that, because I'm not really proficient.
Yeah, most people's understandings of like evolutionary biology. I get you, because I have an evolutionary biology textbook, and it's like,
yeah, I would not want to debate you in evolution. And you'd win.
It's you'd be surprised. A lot of it's just mathematical modeling.
Once again, not good at math, so yeah.
So like I'm sure Dawkins knows this, but Dawkins keeps it simple for the public. Most good evolutionary biologists are really good at mathematics.
That's cool.
Because it's a lot of its population.
And I like math. I'm not personally good at it. I don't think that way. I think in a more big picture, sort of abstract way.
Conceptual,
yeah. That stuff is real super easy for me. like a space shuttle. Thinking real fast and far, super easy. You start making all these little details and things, which I feel like math kind of is. And you have to, I like big structures, but I feel like math wants to know the little tiniest structures inside that structure. I'm like,
the way I always teach like math to people is just like, if you learn school grammar, you can learn math because it's the same thing.
Well, I'm not good at grammar either, so we're totally screwed. Forget it, it's a lost cause then.
Because the semantics for math is conceptual, and what it means, what the equations mean, is conceptual. But the syntax and learning how to pair the syntax with the right symbols and follow the right rules. That's what's difficult, and that's what takes time.
Yeah, it takes memory, too, which I'm not super good at.
At first it does, but I think the benefit from math isn't the memory.
Oh, there's definitely a benefit.
Because even, I have a calculus professor who doesn't remember most of basic, he doesn't remember how to add in trigonometry. There's a special way to add in trigonometry, and he forgot it. And it hasn't really impacted him negatively. Because once you get to the higher level mathematics, it's really about modeling. It's not necessarily about memorizing and learning rote memory of equations. It's about modeling physical objects and how to actually communicate the patterns of the objects in numbers. I almost feel like the higher level stuff is easier than the lower level stuff, which is a shame because most people don't want to do the lower level stuff. Yeah. So it's really grindy. So you have to grind it out.
Well, I probably could have done better. It's just that I was extremely abused by religious fanatic parents in a cult. So I was lived under a cult environment until about 13. It's probably about 11 and a half, 12, something. I don't know exactly, but. Have
you ever done mathematical logic or symbolic logic?
I've never.
It's a little less.
I've never really done logic other than side of just what's theoretical and reason. I don't do math. Every time I try to think about math, it's just the way that math is structured is hard for me. It feels like just the way that, in a sense, math I feel like presents things and then asks them to be figured out. That's not how I actually figure things out. I know it's. Think of it this way. I feel like math wants to know what the center of the puzzle is. In a sense, like say you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, the center first and then builds out from there. Where I'm thinking the opposite way, and I feel like I want to know all the farthest boundaries of math, and it would be my way. So I want all the outside frame of the thing, then I would build in. I know the farthest, in a sense, instead of going this way out, which is probably what science does too, more of a, you know what I'm saying, an inductive, where I feel like mine's deductive. I'm taking the farthest thing that I can know that touches the edge of the reality, and then I'm building it back inward. And I feel like they take it and break its pieces up and explain what it is, sort of. So I'm just saying that's why I feel like math is harder for me. That's all I'm saying.
You might like there's distinctions between types of mathematics, and there's even distinctions between like what people think mathematics is. Okay. So like the philosophy of mathematics. You might like foundations of like number systems. That might be more interesting too. It might be like a easy get into because number theory is just addition, division, and multiplication. It's nothing more than that, and they just use numbers. So there's no
sounds cool
letters. But it's going back to mathematical logic. You already use mathematical logic, but it's weird because like mathematical logic is basically if you say you have argument A and argument B, and from argument A and argument B, you necessarily get C. That's like argumentation theory, right? It's like two premises and a conclusion. What mathematical logic does, it just replaces all the arguments with variables. And then it looks at the patterns of the variables. And if one pattern is, if A, then B, then therefore C, if that's a valid inference, then that's considered a valid judgment. Like universally, that's a valid judgment. So every time you have a premise that's true, one for A and true for B.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what but it gets more sophisticated the later you get on. But they introduce it very simple. very basic, like A, B stuff. And it's not, the reason I mention this is because I think people should be taught this before they're taught mathematics. Like that and basic number, like addition, subtraction, division, geometry. Because mathematical logic teaches you how to think mathematically before you do complex equations. I'm not saying it's impossible to learn. I think that what you're doing there is you're trying to present it more in the way that I like to think. And that's why I think that all school, in a sense, it shouldn't be like a cut and paste where we just try to make everyone forced to the curriculum. We should try to make the curriculum, be forced to the students. Yeah, that's the ideal. But the issue is with the ideal is it's hard to implement. Maybe sometimes you don't want to implement it because it might be not feasible in some way that we just haven't seen. It's like an unforeseen complication and the ideal. That's one of the things I liked about Plato is Plato is very idealistic, and he gives you reference points, lets you reference what an ideal looks like in his Republic, where he has the warriors, the lowly class and the elite class. But reality doesn't, like the actual society doesn't play out that black and white, right? No. There's such a bigger continuum, but he gives you this kind of, okay, well, somewhere in society those kind of gists exist. You can kind of chop it up in that way, and it gives you a reference point, which is why I always liked ideals. But you have to be careful with them because sometimes they might not be practical. Well, yeah, and I think that in general, to me, the most broad thinking errors are that stem from the fact that people generalize, that they're not detailed. And I know I'm not super detailed either, so I try to force myself realizing, like fallibilism, realizing, Damien, this is a major error in your thinking. You like to generalize things. You see big things, but everything is not reducible to generalizations. You need to be careful. You would like complex systems theories. Basically, what they do is generalization by default. For instance, if you saw, how birds fly in patterns? Yeah. Like if you go on the African deserts, and they look like these shapes are forming. But what they do is they'll model each individual agent with a generalized set of rules. So if you want to understand the complex system of this bird flying together, you assign for example, these 4 following rules to each agent. Don't fly too far from your neighbor on the right. Don't fly too far from your neighbor on the left. Don't make any decisions on your own. And then you'll get that kind of emergent pattern. So they do individual agent-based modeling. And then the individuals contribute to a complex system. And so if you think about traffic stops, right? How do the emergent patterns at traffic stops show up? Well, people are following rules. Red light means don't go. True. Green light means go. And so those 3 individual rules give you emergence to a bigger complex system. And they're very general with their reasoning. Yeah, I appreciate you desiring to explain that. Well, no, I'm just saying because I think a lot of people, when they're presented with hard tasks, they just give up. They just go, oh, well. And so I really appreciate that you're trying. I really think that shows a lot of character on your part. Well, I just love knowledge, right? And, well, like I said, that's why I wanted to talk to you again, dude. That's why I hope that I could talk to you many more times, because I have that same goal, man. I'm a truth seeker. I just want what's real, what's true, and then I want what's useful, what's beneficial, what's valuable, what's going to produce human flourishing for me and others. You know what I always wanted to do is I always want to find like 5 good people, like people who are just bright. Yeah. And do a Google Hangout in a sense, but have it be like a book club Google Hangout. That'd be awesome. Dude, yeah, that would be. Dude, I'm hungry to talk to really intelligent people because I'm not saying that there's not smart people, but when you have someone who's like you, who's really, really bright, it's really, really fun for me. People always say that, but then I always tell myself that I'm just a primitive ape, right? Well, but it's always hard for me to judge. Well, but the fact that you would do that shows humility, either that or shame. So either you're doing it because
you're feeling a shame that you're not good enough, so you feel like that what I've presented wasn't accurate, and so you have no right to own it. Or you're being humble for someone that could be, a good thing, because humility to me doesn't always mean, once again, it can be shame. It can be that you feel shame, so you try to be humble as a reaction, but not as a thought. If you're doing it because of thought, then I think you're an admirable person. But is it for that?
For me, it's mostly just skepticism. I'm not really certain about, because I do get.
See, I don't agree with that. So right now I'm going to tell you, you're not smart enough. In fact, you're not a genius. In fact, I doubt your intellect.
Well, I know I'm not dumb, but I'm.
So you do hold a foundational opinion when I said that, right? Skepticism was only acceptable when the threat against that was minimal. But when the threat was that your character might be on the line, your skepticism is going to wane. To me,
I know what's like. I have a conception of what dumb really looks like. But I don't have a conception. I can read books by people who are like really, really smart, so quote unquote geniuses.
Yeah.
But I haven't talked to enough of these quote unquote geniuses to actually be able to put myself in an appropriate place. Right. So what I'm saying is I know the bottom of it, like the very bottom of the barrel, but I don't know where the top is. And because I don't know where the top is, I don't know where I am.
Well, first off, I would say that the top is only relative to what you think the top is. Because Einstein could be an idiot if the level is that only half intelligent is at 30,000 or at 3,000. So then a 300 would be nothing. Because if the 3,000 is the marker, then everyone's an idiot. So I mean,
well, yeah, in that sense, yeah, everyone is an idiot because 3,000 probably isn't that. 3,000 probably isn't even that impressive. But relative to the human scales of say 170 to 100,
right? Exactly.
Yeah, and I wouldn't know where and even then, like there are people who have IQs of 160, and they work at grocery stores their entire lives, and they never.
And so why do they do that? Do you think it's capitalism that does that? Or do they just choose not to have a success but yet have intellect? Or is it just the lack of opportunities? Because to me, I would say the reason why it took me till 35 before I even went into a college door was because I had to work to live. I had to work hand to mouth. And so I never ever had a chance to even choose anything other than... I remember I had an art scholarship because I'm good at art and stuff, and so, but I told them I can't actually use it for art, use it for truck driving school, because I said I need to be an eating truck driver, not a starving artist. So they were mad, but I said that's too bad. But just imagine if I could have just gone straight to philosophy, or whatever, psychology, and that I didn't have to wait my entire life, or I almost wouldn't have happened. Because only reason I did that is because I got a truck accident and I hurt my foot where I couldn't really do work the way I was doing it. So I was forced into it.
I think there was actually an article I recently read about. I'm not sure if it was a study or what it was, but the premise of the article is that about 30% of people who are successful just got really lucky, and it has nothing to do with like intellectual ability or merit at all. It was just sheer luck.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is that I think that if we based our stuff at getting more out of the utilization, but see, once again, I think that we would have to value literature, we would have to value art, we would have to value philosophy in a way we don't now. We don't. I mean, we don't look at champions of philosophy, not general. The general public looks at even like psychology as a negative thing. Should shrink my brain? Well, maybe your brain needs a shrink because it's swelling out of proportions. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't think. I would say philosophy and science are more popular now than they've been before, with the exception of the ancient Greeks. Those people were just fabulous. Well,
I was just saying, imagine if everything was like ancient Greek. Don't think that we would be better? I mean, it's a tough. Technologically and like medicine-wise, we're better, but like in terms of like social standards, we're lower. We're lower than the Greeks. They actually thought. How many Americans or even Canadians, are really doing a lot of thinking? I'm not saying everybody in Athens was doing thinking, but certainly it was valued.
Yeah. Back then, philosophers actually used to go around and advise people. Like that was their job. Is they weren't locked up inside universities writing books that people don't read.
Yeah, exactly.
They were out in the public, actually working with policymakers, trades, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, and on that note, I want to try to wrap it up, especially because I wanted to save this video before it decides to go bad on us. I would really hate that. But also what to say is I do feel like you're doing that. What you said should happen, I feel like you're doing that. You're putting the philosophy in the general public, and I really thank you for that.
I try.
So could you go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you and all that good stuff? Anything about you that you want to tell them?
Well, I think anything that should be said about me has been said. And yeah, the same places in the beginning, ideasinhat.com or
you say it slower just so people can make sure they hear it.
Ideasinhat and then .com.
Yeah.
Or the YouTube channel.
Right on. So I'm going to make a blog on this too, and I'll share it for everybody. So I really appreciate your time, and again, and it was just as fun as last time. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime.
All right. Have a great day.
So.